Chapter 5. Even I, a cat who champions detailed descriptions, must confess that to write down everything that happens in 24 hours and then read it all would take at least 24 hours, a feat far beyond the capacity of a cat. Thus, it is truly regrettable that I lack the ability and patience to report to the reader every single eccentric word and deed of my master, even though he performs them day in and day out, worthy of meticulous portrayal. Regrettable, but unavoidable. Even cats need rest. After Sōseki and Mighty left, the blustery wind abruptly ceased, and silence fell like the night of a softly falling snow. My master, as usual, shut himself in his study. The children lay down to sleep, their pillows lined up in the six-mat room. Separated by a sliding door, in the south-facing 1.5 mat room, my mistress lay down beside Menko-san, her 3-year-old daughter, to nurse her. The hazy day, having hastened toward dusk, had long since darkened, and the sound of clogs on the street echoed clearly into the living room. From the boarding house next door, the intermittent strains of a minteki flute provided a dull, occasional stimulus to my drowsy ears. Outside, it was probably quite dim. With my stomach churning with abalone broth from dinner, rest was an absolute necessity. That I've vaguely heard that there exists a phenomenon among cats known as cat love, a rather humorous pastime, where in spring some of my local brethren roam about restlessly, even on moonlit nights. However, I have yet to encounter such emotional upheaval. Essentially, love is a cosmic force. From Jupiter in the heavens down to the earthworms and mole crickets chirping in the soil, it's the nature of all things to risk everything for love, so it's understandable that even we cats should indulge in a bit of romantic, if somewhat unsettling, revelry. Looking back, even I was once smitten with Mikako. There's even a rumor that Miss Fujiko, the daughter of Mr. Kaneda, the very instigator of that triangular affair, is infatuated with Mr. Kanzuki. Therefore, I don't for a moment scorn the frenzy of male and female cats running wild throughout the world, their hearts set on a springtime night of passion, dismissing it as an illusion of worldly desires. However, try as I might, I simply can't muster any such feelings. My current state demands only rest. I'm too sleepy for love. I slowly made my way to the foot of the children's futon and drifted into a pleasant sleep. Suddenly, I opened my eyes to find my master had somehow emerged from his study and slipped into the futon beside my mistress. It's my master's habit to bring a small, foreign language book from his study when he goes to bed. However, he never reads more than 2 pages at a time. Sometimes he brings it and places it by his pillow, never even touching it. One would think he wouldn't bother bringing it if he wasn't going to read it, but that's my master all over. No matter how much my mistress laughs or tells him to stop, he never listens. Every night, he painstakingly carries a book he won't read to the bedroom. Sometimes he even gets ambitious and brings 3 or 4. Just the other day, he was bringing Webster's unabridged dictionary every night. I suspect this is an ailment of my master's. Much like a wealthy person who can't fall asleep without the sound of the wind in the pines, my master cannot sleep without a book by his pillow. So, for my master, books are not for reading, but a device to induce sleep. A printed sleeping pill tonight, I peeked to see what he had brought, and sure enough, a thin red book lay half open, practically touching the tips of his mustache. Judging by the way his left thumb was still stuck between the pages, he had actually read 5 or 6 lines tonight, a rare occurrence. Beside the red book, as always, lay his nickel pocket watch, emitting a chilly gleam unsuited to springed my mistress, having tossed her infant a foot or so away, lay with her mouth open, snoring, her head off the pillow. I think there is nothing as unsightly in a human as sleeping with their mouth open. Cats never commit such an indecency. A mouth is for making sounds, and a nose is for breathing. Though I suppose in the north, where humans are lazier and prefer to keep their mouths shut, some of them speak through their noses with a buzzing sound. But breathing solely through one's mouth with a blocked nose is even more unsightly than that. It's dangerous too. Just imagine if a mouse dropping fell from the ceiling looking at the children, they are sleeping just as inelegantly as their parents. Tonko, the elder sister, with her arms stretched out fully as if to assert her elder sister's prerogative, has placed her hand on her younger sister's ear. Sunko, in retaliation, has her foot resting squarely on her sister's stomach. Both have rotated at least 90 degrees from their original sleeping positions. Yet, maintaining these unnatural postures, They both sleep soundly without complaint. Truly, the lamplight of spring is something special. It shines gently, illuminating this innocent yet utterly graceless scene, as if whispering, "Cherish the beautiful night." I wondered what time it was and glanced around the room. All was silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock, my mistress's snoring, and the distant sound of the maid grinding her teeth. This maid always denies grinding her teeth whenever someone mentions it. I have no recollection of ever grinding my teeth, she insists stubbornly, never adding, "I'll try to stop or I'm sorry." She simply maintains that she has no recollection. Of course, she doesn't remember, she does it in her sleep. But the fact remains, whether she remembers or not. There are people in the world who do bad things but believe themselves to be good. It's innocent and fine if they genuinely believe they are blameless, but no matter how innocent they are, the troublesome reality cannot be ignored. I suspect such ladies and gentlemen belong to the same category as this maid. The night seems to have deepened considerably. Someone tapped lightly twice on the kitchen shutters. Strange, no one should be coming at this hour. It must be that rat again. If it is, it's welcome to rampage as it pleases, since I have no intention of catching it. Another tap. This doesn't sound like a rat. If it is a rat, it's a remarkably cautious one. The rats in my master's house, like the students at the school where he teaches, are diligently practicing their mischief day and night, making it their mission to shatter my poor master's sleep. They have no reason to be so hesitant. This is definitely not a rat. Now a scraping sound, as if the shutters were being lifted from below. Simultaneously, the sliding door was gently slid open along its groove. Definitely not a rat. It's a human. If a human is coming uninvited and unlocking the doors at this late hour, it's certainly not Mr. Mighty or Suzuki. Could it be the infamous burglar I've heard so much about? If it is, I'm eager to see his face. The burglar seems to have stepped onto the kitchen floor and taken 2 steps forward. Just as I thought he would take a third, there was a loud clatter, as if he had stumbled. I felt a shiver down my spine, as if my fur had been brushed the wrong way. Silence for a while. My mistress continued to snore peacefully, her mouth still open. My master was probably dreaming about that red book, his thumb still stuck between its pages. Then came the sound of rustling paper from the kitchen. Even a burglar can't see as well in the dark as I can. He must be having trouble. At this point, crouching, I considered, would the burglar emerge from the kitchen and enter the living room? Or would he turn left, pass through the entrance, and head toward the study? The sound of footsteps, followed by the sliding of a door, indicated he had stepped onto the veranda. The burglar had entered the study. Then, silence. I realized I should wake my master and mistress, but how? No useful idea came to me, only a whirlwind of thoughts spinning uselessly in my head. I tried tugging at the edge of the futon with my teeth, but it had no effect. Then I thought of nudging my master's cheek with my cold nose. I brought my nose close to his face, but he simply swatted it away in his sleep. The nose is a sensitive spot, even for a cat. It hurt terribly. Next, I tried meowing to wake them, but for some reason, my throat felt constricted, and I couldn't make a proper sound. I finally managed a few weak, strained meows, and to my surprise, while my master remained fast asleep, the burglar suddenly started moving again. Creaking footsteps approached along the veranda. Here he comes. It's too late now. Resigned, I hid between the sliding door and a wicker trunk, watching and waiting. The burglar's footsteps stopped in front of the bedroom sliding door. I held my breath, wondering what he would do next. Later, I realized that if I could maintain this level of focus while catching rats, I would be unstoppable. My soul felt as if it were about to leap out of my eyes. Thanks to the burglar, I achieved an enlightenment I will never experience again. Suddenly, the third panel of the sliding door, as if wet with rain, changed color in the center. A faint crimson glow deepened, and then, the paper tore, revealing a red tongue. The tongue quickly disappeared into the darkness. In its place, a terrifyingly bright object appeared on the other side of the hole, undoubtedly the burglar's eye. Strangely, it seemed fixated not on anything in the room, but on me, hidden behind the wicker trunk. It was only for a moment, but I felt as if my life had been shortened by the intensity of his gaze. Just as I resolved to leap out from behind the trunk, the bedroom door slid open, and the long-awaited burglar finally appeared before me. As a matter of narrative order, I have the honor of introducing this unexpected guest, the burglar, to you. But before I do, I wish to present a humble opinion for your consideration. The gods of antiquity are revered as omniscient and omnipotent. The God of Christianity, in particular, continues to wear this mask of omniscience and omnipotence even in the 20th century. However, the omniscience and omnipotence conceived by ordinary people can sometimes be interpreted as ignorance and incompetence. This is clearly a paradox. Given that I am probably the only one since the creation of the universe to have articulated this paradox, it fills me with a certain pride, a feeling that perhaps I'm not such a bad cat after all. I would like to present my reasoning here, to impress upon the minds of you arrogant humans that even a cat shouldn't be underestimated. They say that God created the universe and everything in it. That would mean humans are also God's creation. Apparently, it even says so in a book called the Bible. Now, regarding humans, there's something that humans themselves have observed over thousands of years, which has led them to marvel at their own mysterious nature while simultaneously reinforcing their belief in God's omniscience and omnipotence. It is simply this: despite the teeming masses of humanity, no two faces are alike. The components of a face are, of course, fixed, and their size is generally similar. In other words, they are all made from the same materials. Yet, despite being made from the same materials, no two end up the same. It's amazing that the Creator could come up with such a variety of faces using such simple ingredients. One must have a truly creative imagination to achieve such diversity. Considering that even a master painter, after exhausting all his efforts, can only produce a dozen or so different faces, God's skill in undertaking the entire production of humanity must be truly exceptional. It is a level of skill unseen in human society, so calling it omnipotent wouldn't be an exaggeration. Humans seem to be greatly impressed by God in this regard. And indeed, from a human perspective, it's a reasonable thing to be impressed by. However, from a cat's perspective, this same fact can be interpreted as proof of God's incompetence. If not entirely incompetent, then at least not possessing abilities beyond those of humans. God supposedly created as many faces as there are humans, but did he have a clear plan from the outset to create such diversity? Or did he intend to make everyone look the same, like a row of Daruma dolls, but utterly fail, resulting in this chaotic variety? We don't know. The structure of their faces can be seen as both a testament to God's success and a mark of his failure. One could call it omnipotence, or just as easily, incompetence. It's unfortunate that human eyes, placed side by side on a flat plane, can't see both left and right at the same time, so they only grasp half of the truth. Such simple truths are constantly unfolding in their society, yet, blinded by their self-importance and their belief in God, they fail to grasp them. If creating variety is difficult, then producing exact replicas is equally challenging. Asking Raphael to paint two identical Madonnas would be just as troublesome as asking him to paint two completely different ones. In fact, painting two identical ones might be even harder. Asking Kobo Daisha to write his name, Kukai, in exactly the same way he did yesterday might be more difficult than asking him to change his style completely. Human language is learned entirely through imitation. When humans learn practical language from their mothers, nurses, or others, they have no ambition beyond repeating what they hear. They imitate to the best of their ability. The fact that the pronunciation of these imitated languages naturally changes over 10 or 20 years proves that they lack the ability for perfect imitation. True imitation is exceedingly difficult. Therefore, if God could create humans indistinguishable from each other, all bearing the same stamp like a row of Keimno-ko dolls, it would indeed demonstrate his omnipotence. But the fact that he has allowed them to display such a dizzying array of random faces suggests, rather, his incompetence. I've forgotten why I started this discussion. Forgetting one's original point is common even among humans, so I hope you will forgive a cat. Anyway, when I caught a glimpse of the burglar who had slid open the bedroom door and stepped onto the threshold, the above thoughts naturally arose within me. Why did they arise? If you ask why, I'll have to think about it again. Yes, the reason is this. The face of the burglar who stood calmly before me, despite my usual suspicion that God's creations, particularly human faces, might be the result of incompetence, possessed such distinctive features that they dispelled all such doubts. And what were these features? None other than the fact that his face was the spitting image of my dear, handsome friend, Kanzuki Mizushima. I don't know many burglars, of course, but based on the nature of their profession, I had formed a mental image of what a burglar should look like. I had arbitrarily decided that they must have small, coin-sized eyes spread wide apart on either side of a flat nose, and a head shaped like a chestnut burr. But seeing is believing, and as it turned out, my imagination wasn't nearly as robust as I thought. This burglar was tall and slender, with a straight, dark unibrow, a dashing and impressive burglar. He looked to be about 26 or 27, which also matched Kanzuki. If God has the skill to create two such similar faces, he can hardly be called incompetent. In fact, the resemblance was so uncanny that I briefly wondered if Kanzuki himself had lost his mind and gone out burgling in the middle of the night. Only the lack of dark stubble on his upper lip convinced me otherwise. Kanzuki is a charming young man, with a touch of bitterness, whom Mighty called a blank check, a creation perfectly capable of capturing the affections of Miss Fujiko Kaneda. But judging from this burglar's appearance, his appeal to women was no less than Kanzuki's. If Miss Kaneda was attracted to Kanzuki's eyes and words, logically, she should be equally drawn to this burglar. Whether she would be or not is another matter, but logic dictates it. A clever and perceptive young lady like her would surely understand this without needing to be told. So even if this burglar were offered in place of Kanzuki, she would surely bestow her full affection upon him, resulting in a harmonious and fruitful union. Even if Kanzuki, swayed by Mighty's arguments, were to break off this perfect match, as long as this burglar exists, all is not lost. Having envisioned the potential unfolding of future events, I felt a sense of relief for Miss Fujiko. This burglar's existence is essential to her future happiness. The burglar was carrying something under his arm. It was the old blanket that my master had tossed into the study earlier. He was wearing a cotton jacket and a hakata sash tied around his waist, his pale shins exposed below the knees. He lifted one foot to step onto the tatami mat. Just then, my master, who had been dreaming about that red book with his thumb stuck in it, turned over in his sleep and muttered, "Kanzuki." The burglar dropped the blanket and quickly withdrew his foot. I could see his two slender shins faintly moving behind the sliding door. My master mumbled and groaned, swatted the red book away, and scratched his arm as if it were covered in a rash. Then he fell silent, his head off the pillow, fast asleep. Apparently, Kanzuki had been nothing more than a sleep-muttered word. The burglar stood on the veranda for a while, observing the room. Once he was satisfied that the couple were fast asleep, he stepped onto the tatami. This time, there were no cries of Kanzuki. He brought his other foot inside. A single spring lamp illuminated the six-mat room, the burglar's shadow sharply dividing it in two, stretching from behind the wicker trunk, over my head, and darkening half the wall. Looking back, I saw the burglar's face, a vague shadow 2/3 of the way up the wall. Even a handsome man looks like a monster with 8 heads when only his shadow is visible. The burglar peered down at my mistress's sleeping face and smirked for some reason. Even his smirk was a perfect imitation of Kanzuki's, much to my surprise, why my mistress's pillow sat a small, nailed-shut wooden box, about 4 inches square and 1.5 feet tall. It contained mountain yams, a gift from Mr. Sanpei Tatara, who lived in Karatsu, Hizen province, and had recently visited. It's unusual to keep mountain yams by one's pillow, but my mistress is the kind of woman who keeps sugar for cooking in her dresser, someone with little sense of what is appropriate wear. She wouldn't be fazed by mountain yams, or even pickled daikon radish, in her bedroom. But the burglar, being no god, couldn't possibly know this. Seeing the box placed so carefully close at hand, he naturally assumed its contents were precious. He lifted it slightly, and finding it heavier than he expected, seemed quite pleased. I was just starting to think, he's going to steal the yams. The very idea of this handsome young man stealing yams was so absurd, it almost made me laugh. But making any noise would be dangerous, so I held it in. Then, the burglar began carefully wrapping the box of yams in the old blanket. He looked around for something to tie it with. Luckily, my master had taken off his crepe obi when he went to bed. The burglar securely fastened the box with the obi, slung it effortlessly onto his back, a rather unladylike gesture, and then stuffed 2 of the children's undershirts into the seat of my master's flannel underpants. The result was a curious bulge around his crotch, as if a blue racer had swallowed a frog, or perhaps it was more like a blue racer in the final stages of pregnancy. In any case, it was a strange sight. Try it yourself if you don't believe me. The burglar wrapped the underpants around his neck like a scarf. Next, he spread my master's punji jacket out like a large furoshiki cloth and neatly folded my mistress's obi, my master's hari jacket, his undershirt, and various other items inside. I was rather impressed by his skillful and efficient packing. He then tied the bundle together with my mistress's obijime and obiage, slung it over his shoulder, and looked around for anything else to take. Spotting the Asahi newspaper bag by my master's head, he tossed it into his sleeve. He pulled out a match from the bag, struck it against the lamp, and lit a cigarette. He took a long, satisfying drag, and as the smoke curled around the milky white glass chimney, his footsteps retreated along the veranda and faded away. My master and mistress slept on, undisturbed. Humans are surprisingly careless. I needed another short rest. I can't keep talking forever. When I finally woke up, the March sky was bright and clear, and my master and mistress were talking to a policeman by the back door. So, he came in through here and went into the bedroom? And you were both asleep and didn't notice a thing? Yes, my master replied, looking a little embarrassed. And what time did the robbery occur? The policeman asked, a rather pointless question. If they knew the time, they would have noticed the burglar. My master and mistress, unable to answer, began a discussion. What time was it? Let me see, my mistress said, as if thinking hard would provide the answer. What time did you go to bed last night? I went to bed after him. Yes, I lay down before you. What time did we wake up? Around 7:30, wasn't it? So, what time would the thief have entered? Sometime during the night, I suppose. Of course, it was during the night, but around what time? I can't say for certain without thinking it through, my mistress said, still pondering. The policeman had only asked as a formality and didn't really care when the burglar had entered. Any answer, even a made-up one, would have sufficed. He was getting impatient with their pointless exchange. So, the time of the robbery is unknown? Well, yes, my master replied, in his usual vague manner. The policeman, without a trace of amusement, said, All right then, please file a formal complaint stating that on such and such date in the 38th year of Meiji, you went to bed with the doors locked, and a thief entered by removing the shutters from such and such place, entered your residence, and stole the following items. It's a formal complaint, not just a report. You don't need to address it to anyone in particular. Do we need to list every single item? Yes, make a list with each item and its value, like 1 hari, value, such and such amount. No point in going inside. It's already been stolen. He said this casually and left. My master brought out his writing brush, inkstone, and paper to the middle of the living room and called to my mistress. I'm going to write the complaint now, so tell me everything that was stolen. Come on, tell me. He spoke as if picking a fight. Oh, good heavens, come on, tell me. Who do you think you're talking to? She retorted, plopping down without even tying her obi properly. What's with that attitude? You look like a failed brothel madam. Why aren't you dressed properly? If you don't like it, buy me new clothes. It's not my fault I was robbed, whether I look like a brothel madam or not. They took your obi too? How cruel. All right, let's start with the obi. What kind of obi was it? What kind of obi? As if I have so many. It was a black satin and crepe reversible obi. 1 black satin and crepe reversible obi. How much was it worth? About 6 yen. You wear expensive obis, don't you? Next time, get one for about 1 yen 50. Where can I find an obi for that price? See, this is why you're so heartless. You wouldn't care if your wife walked around looking like a beggar, as long as you look presentable. All right, what else? My silk hari. That was a keepsake from Kono's aunt, so even though it's silk, it's not like the silk they make nowadays. Spare me the details. How much? 15 yen. A 15 yen hari? You live beyond your means. Well, if you'd buy me one, I wouldn't have to wear hand-me-downs. Next. A pair of black tabi socks. Yours, actually. 27 sen. And a box of mountain yams. They took the yams too? Are they going to boil them or make tororo with them? How should I know? Why don't you go ask the burglar? How much were they worth? I don't know the price of yams. Then let's say 12 yen 50. Don't be ridiculous. Even if they were dug up in Karatsu, mountain yams aren't worth 12 yen 50, but you just said you didn't know. I don't, but 12 yen 50 is outrageous. I don't know, but 12 yen 50 is outrageous. What kind of logic is that? That's why I call you Otentine Paleologus. What's that? Otentine Paleologus, that's what? What does Otentine Paleologus mean? Never mind. What else was stolen? None of my clothes are missing, are they? That's all. Now tell me what Otentine Paleologus means. It doesn't mean anything. You could tell me, you know. You're being very condescending. You probably think I don't understand English and are trying to insult me. Don't be silly. Just tell me the rest of the stolen items. I need to finish this complaint so we can get our things back. If I'm not getting an explanation, there are no more items. You're so stubborn. Fine, do as you please. I'm not writing this complaint anymore. Then I won't tell you the rest of the items. If you're writing the complaint yourself, I don't need your help. Then forget it, my master said, standing up abruptly and returning to his study. My mistress retreated to the living room and sat down at her sewing box. For a good 10 minutes, they both sat in silence, glaring at the sliding doors. Just then, the front door opened with a bang, and in walked Mr. Sanpei Tatara, the yam-giver himself. Mr. Tatara had once been a live-in student at our house, but he had since graduated from law school and was now employed in the mining division of a certain company. He was another budding businessman, following in the footsteps of Mr. Suzuki. Due to his past connection with the family, Mr. Tatara often visited his old teacher's humble abode, sometimes spending the entire Sunday there. Good day, beautiful weather we're having, he greeted my mistress, dropping to his knees in his trousers, his Karatsu dialect, or whatever it was, thick in the air. Oh, Mr. Tatara. Where's sensei? He's in his study. It's no good for sensei to be cooped up studying all the time. It's Sunday, you know. Tell him yourself. He never listens to me. Well, but, Mr. Tatara started, glancing around the room. I don't see the young ladies today. He had barely finished speaking when Tonko and Sunko came running from the next room. Mr. Tatara, did you bring sushi today? Tonko asked, remembering his previous promise. Scratching his head, Mr. Tatara confessed, you have a good memory. I'll bring some next time, I promise. I forgot today. No fair. Tonko exclaimed, and Sunko immediately echoed, no fair. My mistress's mood seemed to improve, a faint smile appearing on her face. I didn't bring sushi, but I did bring those mountain yams. Have you young ladies tried them yet? Mountain yams? What are those? Tonko asked, and Sunko, as usual, repeated, mountain yams? What are those? You haven't tried them? Ask your mother to cook them for you. Karatsu yams are much tastier than the ones you get in Tokyo, Mr. Tatara boasted of his local produce. My mistress, finally realizing what he was talking about, exclaimed. Oh, Mr. Tatara, thank you so much for the other day. They were delicious. Did you try them? I packed them carefully in a sturdy box so they wouldn't break. They should have kept well. Actually, a burglar came last night and took them. A burglar? What a fool. Who steals mountain yams? Mr. Tatara seemed genuinely puzzled. Mama, a burglar came last night? Tonko asked. Yes, my mistress replied casually. A burglar came, and, a burglar came, what kind of face did he have? Sunko asked. My mistress, unsure how to answer such a question, replied. He had a scary face, glancing at Mr. Tatara. A scary face, like Mr. Tatara's? Tonko pressed, mercilessly. Don't be silly. Ha ha ha, is my face really that scary? I'm in trouble. He scratched his head. On the back of his head, Mr. Tatara had a bald spot about an inch in diameter. It had appeared about a month ago, and although he had seen a doctor, it showed no signs of healing. Tonko had been the first to notice it. Look, Mr. Tatara's head is shiny, like Mama's. I told you to be quiet. Mama, the burglar's head was shiny too, Sunko chimed in. My mistress and Mr. Tatara burst out laughing, but the children were getting too boisterous to continue the conversation. All right, young ladies, why don't you go play in the garden? Mama will give you some nice snacks later, my mistress said, finally shooing them away. Turning to Mr. Tatara, she asked, what happened to your head? Worms got to it. It's taking ages to heal. Do you have any, Good heavens, worms. Well, I have some thinning hair, but that's because I'm a woman, and it's where my mage is tied. All baldness is caused by bacteria. Mine isn't caused by bacteria. Don't be stubborn, It's not bacteria. What's the English word for baldness, anyway? Bald, I think. No, there's a longer word. Ask Sensei, he'll know. He won't tell me, that's why I'm asking you. I only know bald. A long word, you say? What's it like? It's Otentine Paleologus. Otentine means bald, and Paleologus must mean head. Could be. I'll ask Sensei or look it up in Webster's later. But Sensei's been acting rather strange lately. It's such a nice day, yet he's cooped up inside. His stomach won't get any better like that. You should suggest he go out for a walk, maybe to Ueno to see the cherry blossoms. You take him. He never listens to me. Is he still eating jam? Yes, as always. He was complaining the other day, saying, my wife eats my jam too quickly, it's troubling. I don't eat that much, there must be some mistake. So I said, well, it must be the young ladies or you who are eating it. Oh, you're terrible, why would you say that? But, you look like you enjoy jam. How can you tell from my face? I don't know, but, so you don't eat any jam at all? Of course, I eat some. What's wrong with that? It's ours. Ha ha ha, I thought so. Anyway, that burglar was rather unfortunate, wasn't he? Did he only take the mountain yams? If it were only the yams, it wouldn't be so bad, but he took all our everyday clothes as well. That's a problem, isn't it? Will you have to borrow money again? It's a shame this cat isn't a dog. You should really get a big dog. Cats are useless, they just eat. Does it even catch mice? Not a single one. It's a truly lazy and impudent cat. Oh dear, that's no good. Get rid of it. I'll take it and stew it. How about that? Oh, do you eat cats, Mr. Tatara? I do. Cat is quite delicious. My, you're quite the adventurer. I had heard that some of the lower-class students were uncivilized enough to eat cats, but I never imagined that Mr. Tatara, a person I held in some esteem, would be one of them. He wasn't even a student anymore, he was a law graduate, an employee of the Matsui Trading Company. My astonishment was beyond words. The saying treat everyone like a potential burglar had already been proven true by that Kanzuki look-alike, but thanks to Mr. Tatara, I had now learned a new truth. Treat everyone like a potential cat-eater. The more one lives, the more one learns. Learning is good, but it makes life more dangerous, less carefree. Becoming cunning, becoming cowardly, developing a two-faced personality, these are all consequences of knowledge, and knowledge is the burden of age. That's why there aren't many decent old people. I even began to think that perhaps it would be better for me to be stewed in Mr. Tatara's pot with some onions, achieving enlightenment through early demise. I shrank into a corner, feeling small and insignificant. Just then, my master, who had retreated to his study after the argument with my mistress, emerged, having heard Mr. Tatara's voice. Sensei, I heard you had a burglar. How foolish, he began, without any preamble. It's foolish of the burglar to break in, my master replied, still convinced of his own cleverness. It's foolish of him, but it's not very clever of you to be robbed either. The cleverest person is someone like you, Mr. Tatara, who doesn't have anything worth stealing, my mistress chimed in, defending her husband. But the most foolish of all is this cat. Really, what's the point of it? It doesn't catch mice, and it doesn't even react to a burglar. Sensei, why don't you give me this cat? It's of no use to you. You can have it. What are you going to do with it? Stew it. My master let out a weak, sickly chuckle at this drastic statement but didn't reply. Mr. Tatara, to my great relief, didn't press the matter. My master changed the subject. I don't care about the cat, but I'm freezing without my clothes. He looked utterly dejected. He certainly must have been cold. Until yesterday, he had been wearing 2 layers of padded clothing, but today he was only wearing a lined kimono and a short-sleeved shirt, and he hadn't moved from his desk all day. His insufficient blood circulation, focused entirely on his stomach, wasn't reaching his extremities. Sensei, being a teacher is no good. You get robbed, and immediately you're in trouble. Why don't you change careers and become a businessman? He hates businessmen, so it's no use suggesting that, my mistress interjected. She clearly wanted him to become a businessman. Sensei, how many years have you been teaching? 9 years, I think, my mistress said, glancing at my master. He didn't confirm or deny it. 9 years, and still no raise. No matter how hard he studies, no one appreciates him. He's a lonely scholar, all alone. Mr. Tatara recited a line of poetry he had learned in middle school. My mistress, not quite understanding, didn't reply. I certainly dislike teaching, but I dislike business even more, my master said, as if pondering his preferences. So, the only thing you don't dislike is your wife? Mr. Tatara joked, rather out of character. I dislike her the most, my master replied concisely. My mistress turned away, feigning indifference, then looked back at my master. I suppose you dislike being alive, too, she said, thinking she had scored a point. Not particularly fond of it, he replied nonchalantly. He was impossible, Sensei. You should go for a brisk walk. You'll ruin your health staying inside all day, and become a businessman. Making money is incredibly easy. Easy for you to say, you don't make any. I only started working last year. Even so, I have more savings than Sensei. How much have you saved? My mistress asked eagerly. 50 yen already. How much is your monthly salary? Another question from my mistress. 30 yen. The company keeps 5 yen every month and saves it for me, in case I need it later. Why don't you buy some Sotobori line stocks with your allowance? They'll double in 3 or 4 months. Really, if you have even a little money, you can easily double or triple it. If I had that kind of money, I wouldn't be worried about being robbed. That's why being a businessman is the best. If Sensei had practiced law and joined a company or a bank, he'd be earning 300 or 400 yen a month by now. Such a waste. Sensei, do you know a mechanical engineer named Tajiro Suzuki? Yes, he was here yesterday. Is that so? I met him at a party the other day, and when I mentioned you, he said, oh, you knew Kashami when he was a student? I used to share a house with him in Koishikawa. Give him my regards, I'll visit him soon. I heard he recently moved to Tokyo. Yes, he used to work in the Kyushu coal mines, but he's been transferred to the Tokyo office. He's doing very well. He even talks to someone like me as an equal. Sensei, how much do you think he earns? I don't know. 250 yen a month, plus bonuses at the end of the year, so it averages out to about 400 or 500 yen. Someone like him is doing so well. Sensei, you're a fool to be stuck teaching for 10 years, barely scraping by. He really is a fool, my master said. Even a transcendentalist like him wasn't immune to the allure of money. In fact, being so poor, he probably desired it even more than the average person. Mr. Tatara, having sufficiently extolled the virtues of business, changed the subject again. Does a man named Kanzuki Mizushima visit Sensei? Yes, quite often. What kind of person is he? He's apparently very learned. Is he handsome? About as handsome as you, Mr. Tatara. Is that so? As handsome as me? Mr. Tatara asked seriously. Why do you ask about Kanzuki? My master asked. Someone asked me about him recently. Is he someone worth asking about? Mr. Tatara already seemed to hold Kanzuki in higher regard than himself, despite not having met him. He's far more accomplished than you. Really? More accomplished than me? He showed neither amusement nor anger. This was characteristic of Mr. Tatara. Will he be getting his doctorate soon? He's working on his dissertation. What a fool. Writing a doctoral dissertation. I thought he was more sensible than that. Your insights are as impressive as ever, my mistress said sarcastically. When he gets his doctorate, I heard he's going to marry so-and-so's daughter. What a fool. Getting a doctorate just to marry a girl. She'd be better off marrying me, he declared. Marrying who? The man who asked me about Mizushima. Suzuki? No, not him, he wouldn't say something like that. He has bigger fish to fry. You're all talk, Mr. Tatara. You act so high and mighty here, but I bet you shrink like a violet in front of someone like Suzuki. Yes, it's safer that way. Tatara, shall we go for a walk? My master suddenly said. He was probably cold in his single-layered kimono and thought some exercise would warm him up. Mr. Tatara, ever the impulsive one, readily agreed. Let's. Shall we go to Ueno? Or to Imasaka for some dango? Sensei, have you tried the dango there? You should try it sometime. It's soft and cheap. They serve sake too. He continued his rambling chatter as my master put on his hat and headed for the entrance. I needed another rest. I'll skip the details of what my master and Mr. Tatara did in Ueno Park and how many plates of dango they ate at Imasaka. I lack the investigative skills and the courage to follow them, so I must rest in the meantime. Rest is a right demanded by all living creatures under heaven. Those who are obligated to live and move in this world must rest to fulfill that obligation. If God were to say, "You were born to work, not to sleep," I would reply, "I was born to work, as you say, and therefore, I require rest to work." Even a stubborn, strong-willed man like my master, who complains incessantly about machines, takes unscheduled breaks, even on weekdays. As a sensitive and emotional creature who toils day and night, I, even as a cat, require more rest than my master. I'm slightly bothered by Mr. Tatara's earlier remark about me being a useless freeloader, good for nothing but resting. Superficial people, obsessed with the material world, perceive activity only through the five senses. They think that unless one is running around and sweating, one isn't working. The monk Daruma supposedly sat in meditation until his legs rotted. But even if a vine crept in through a crack in the wall and covered his eyes and mouth, he wouldn't have been sleeping or dead. His mind would have been constantly active, pondering profound truths. Confucian scholars also practice quiet sitting. But that doesn't mean they just sit idly in a room doing nothing. Their mental activity is more intense than most people's. It's just that because they appear outwardly calm and composed, the ignorant masses mistake these intellectual giants for comatose or dead simpletons, labeling them useless freeloaders or parasites. These ignorant masses possess defective vision, unable to see beyond the superficial, and that Mr. Sanpei Tatara is a prime example of someone who sees only the surface and not the heart. It's understandable that he considers me no better than dried dung. But it's regrettable that even my master, who has read a fair number of books and should understand the truth of things, readily agrees with the shallow Mr. Tatara, showing no inclination to defend me from being stewed in a cat pot. However, upon further reflection, their disdain for me isn't entirely unreasonable. Loud noises don't reach deaf ears, and few appreciate the refined beauty of classical poetry. Trying to explain the brilliance of my soul to those who cannot perceive activity beyond the physical is like asking a monk to grow hair, asking a tuner to give a speech, asking a train to derail, asking my master to resign, or asking Mr. Tatara to stop thinking about money. It's simply asking too much. But even a cat is a social animal. As a social animal, no matter how highly I esteem myself, I must maintain some level of harmony with society. It's unfortunate that my master, my mistress, the maid, and even Mr. Tatara fail to appreciate me for who I am. While I must accept this, it would be a grave matter if they were to skin me, sell my hide to a shamisen maker, and serve my flesh to Mr. Tatara. I am a cat of intellect, born into this world with a mission to use my mind. My body is precious. As the saying goes, a child of wealth does not sit by a well, so recklessly pursuing a transcendental existence and needlessly endangering myself would not only bring me misfortune but also defy the will of heaven. Even a fierce tiger, when placed in a zoo, must reside next to a pig. A wild goose, captured and caged, shares a fate with a chicken. If I must live among ordinary people, I must become an ordinary cat. And to be an ordinary cat, I must catch mice. I have finally resolved to catch a mouse. I've heard that Japan is at war with Russia. As a Japanese cat, I naturally support Japan. I'd even be willing to form a mixed-breed cat brigade and scratch those Russian soldiers if I could. Being such a vigorous cat, I could easily catch a mouse or two if I put my mind to it. Once, Someone asked a famous Zen master how to achieve enlightenment. The master replied, like a cat watching a mouse. Like a cat catching a mouse means that there's no chance of failure. There are sayings about clever women, but there are no sayings about clever cats failing to catch mice. So even a clever cat like myself should have no trouble catching one. In fact, I shouldn't be able to fail to catch one. The reason I haven't caught any so far is simply that I haven't wanted to. The spring day darkened like yesterday, and cherry blossom petals, carried by the wind, drifted through a tear in the kitchen's sliding door and landed in the water bucket, their shadows pale in the dim light of the kitchen lamp. Tonight, I would achieve a great feat and surprise everyone. But first, I needed to survey the battlefield and familiarize myself with the terrain. The battleground, of course, isn't very large. Perhaps 4 tatami mats in size. One mat is divided in two, half being a sink and the other half an earthen floor used by the deliveryman from the sake shop and the greengrocer. The hearth, rather grand for such a modest kitchen, features gleaming copper kettles. Behind it, a 2-foot gap separates it from the wall, the very spot where I enjoy my abalone broth. A 6-foot cupboard for dishes and bowls further constricts the already small kitchen, its exposed shelves nearly brushing the ceiling. Below it, a grinding bowl lies overturned, a small bucket nestled inside, its bottom facing me. A grater and a pestle hang beside it, and a fire bucket sits forlornly nearby. From the dark wooden beams above, a hook hangs down, from which a large, flat basket swings gently in the breeze. When I first arrived in this house, I couldn't understand the purpose of this basket. But when I realized it was used to keep food out of my reach, I was struck by the sheer malice of humans. Now for the strategy. The battle with the mouse must, of course, take place where the mouse appears. No matter how strategically advantageous this location may be, simply waiting here won't start a war. I need to study the mouse's escape routes. Standing in the middle of the kitchen, I looked around. I felt like Admiral Togo. Where will it come from? The maid had just returned from the bathhouse. The children were fast asleep. My master, having returned from his dango outing in Imasaka, was once again shut in his study. My mistress. I didn't know what she was doing. Probably dozing off, dreaming of mountain yams. Occasionally, a rickshaw passed by the gate, leaving an even deeper silence in its wake. My determination, my spirit, the kitchen scene, the surrounding silence, everything felt tragically heroic. I couldn't help but feel like the Admiral Togo of cats. Anyone would feel a certain thrill in such a situation, but beneath this thrill, I detected a deep anxiety. I was prepared to fight the mouse, I wasn't afraid of how many might come. But not knowing where they would appear from was unsettling. Based on my careful observations, the enemy had 3 possible escape routes. If they were saw rats, they would likely follow the pipes from the sink, behind the hearth. In that case, I would hide behind the fire bucket and cut off their retreat. Or they might emerge unexpectedly from the drain hole in the bathroom floor, making their way through the bathroom and into the kitchen. Then I would position myself on the lid of the rice cooker and pounce on them as they passed below. Looking around again, I noticed a half-moon-shaped hole gnawed in the bottom right corner of the cupboard door, possibly another entry and exit point. Sniffing it, I detected a faint mousy odor. If they dared to emerge from there, I would use the pillar as a shield and attack from the side. What if they came from the ceiling? Looking up, I saw the dark soot shimmering in the lamplight, like an inverted image of hell. Climbing up there was beyond my capabilities. But surely they wouldn't fall from such a height. I decided to disregard that possibility. Still, the thought of being attacked from 3 directions was concerning. I could handle 1 or even 2 at a time. But 3 would be too much, even for a cat instinctively equipped to catch mice. I couldn't call for backup, like that black cat from the rickshaw puller's place, it would be beneath my dignity. What to do? When no good ideas come to mind, the best way to find peace is to decide that such a thing won't happen. It's easier to believe that what hasn't happened won't happen. Look around you. A bride married yesterday might die today, but the groom, celebrating his good fortune, doesn't seem to worry about it. It's not that he doesn't have reason to worry. It's that worrying is pointless. In my case, I had no logical basis for asserting that a 3-pronged attack wouldn't occur, But believing it wouldn't happen brought me peace of mind. Peace of mind is essential for all creatures. I, too, desire peace of mind. Therefore, I decided a three-pronged attack wouldn't happen, but I was still uneasy. As I pondered why, it finally dawned on me. My anxiety stemmed from the difficulty of choosing the best strategy among the three I had devised. I had a plan for each possible entry point, but choosing one specific plan was proving to be a challenge. Admiral Togo must have been greatly troubled by whether the Baltic fleet would pass through the Tsushima Strait, the Tsugaru Strait, or take the long route around the Soya Strait. Now, looking back on my own situation, I can truly empathize with his predicament. I wasn't just like Admiral Togo in my overall situation, I was also his comrade in this particular dilemma. Yes, I was lost in strategic contemplation. The torn sliding door suddenly opened, and the maid's face popped in. When I say face popped in, I don't mean she didn't have a body. It's just that in the dim light, her face, more flushed than usual from the bathhouse, stood out starkly against the darkness. Perhaps chastened by last night's events, she was locking up the kitchen early. From the study, my master's voice called out, "Put my walking stick by my pillow." I couldn't understand why he wanted a walking stick by his pillow. He wasn't planning to emulate a Chinese hero, listening for the sound of the dragon's roar, was he? Yesterday it was mountain yams, today a walking stick. What will it be tomorrow? The night was still young, the mouse was unlikely to appear yet. I needed a pre-battle NAP. My master's kitchen had no sliding windows. Instead, a 1-foot wide opening above the sliding door, like a transom, served as ventilation, open in both summer and winter. I woke up to a gust of wind blowing through this opening, carrying a flurry of cherry blossom petals. The hazy moon had risen, casting the shadow of the hearth diagonally across the raised floor. I twitched my ears a few times, checking for any activity in the house. All was quiet, only the ticking of the grandfather clock, just like last night. It was time for the mouse to appear. Where would it come from? A rustling sound started inside the cupboard. It sounded like something was pouring at the edge of a small plate. This is it. I crouched beside the hole, waiting. But nothing emerged. The plate rustling stopped, replaced by a heavier, rumbling sound, as if something was now tackling a larger bowl. It was so close, only about 3 inches from my nose. Occasionally, footsteps approached the hole, then retreated. Not a single mouse showed its face. The enemy was right there on the other side of the door, yet I had to patiently wait by the hole. This was trying my patience. The mice were probably having a ball inside the cupboard. If only the maid had left the door open a crack. Then, I heard a faint click from behind the hearth, near where I usually enjoyed my abalone broth. They've come this way too. I crept stealthily toward the sound. A tail flickered between the bucket and the wall, then disappeared under the sink. A moment later, a gargling cup clattered against a metal basin in the bathroom. They're behind me. As I turned, a large rat, almost 5 inches long, darted out from under the toothbrush holder and scurried under the veranda. I pounced after it, but it was already gone. Catching a mouse was harder than I thought. Perhaps I lacked innate mouse-catching ability. When I returned to the kitchen, the enemy dashed out of the cupboard. When I guarded the cupboard, they jumped out from under the sink. When I stood my ground in the middle of the kitchen, they made noises from all 3 directions. Were they being mischievous, or cowardly? They were certainly not fighting fair. I dashed back and forth 15 or 16 times, exhausting myself both physically and mentally, but without success. It was frustrating. Even Admiral Togo would have been at a loss against such a devious enemy. At first, I had been full of courage and fighting spirit, even experiencing a sense of tragic heroism. But now, I was just tired, sleepy, and annoyed. I sat down in the middle of the kitchen, refusing to move. But even sitting still, with my eyes scanning every direction, I knew the enemy, being cowardly, wouldn't dare to approach. When your intended adversary turns out to be a petty little creature, the sense of glorious battle fades, leaving only annoyance. Annoyance gives way to apathy, and apathy leads to drowsiness. Having followed this progression, I finally succumbed to sleep. Even in the midst of battle, rest is essential. I was lying on my side, facing the open transom, when a gust of wind blew in another flurry of cherry blossom petals. Suddenly, Something shot out of the cupboard like a bullet and, before I could react, sank its teeth into my left ear. Another dark shape latched onto my tail. It all happened in a flash. Instinctively, I leaped into the air, every muscle tense, trying to shake off the attacker. The one clinging to my ear lost its grip and dangled from my face. Unexpectedly, the tip of its soft, rubbery tail brushed against my mouth. Seizing the opportunity, I clamped down on it and shook my head violently. The tail remained between my teeth, but the body slammed against the newspaper-covered wall and bounced onto the raised floor. Just as it scrambled to its feet, I pounced again. It dodged my attack, skittering past my nose and scrambling onto the edge of the cupboard. It looked down at me from above. I looked up at it from below. 5 feet separated us. Moonlight streamed in through the transom, cutting a wide swathe across the floor. I gathered my strength and leaped onto the cupboard. My front paws landed on the edge, but my hind legs scrabbled in the air. The dark shape was still clinging to my tail, refusing to let go. I was in a precarious position. Every time I tried to adjust my grip, the weight on my tail pulled me back. If I slipped, I would fall. I was in real danger now. The sound of claws scratching the cupboard echoed through the kitchen. This wouldn't do. As I tried to reposition my left paw, I missed my footing and was left hanging by my right claw. My body spun, pulled by my own weight and the weight of the creature attached to my tail. The rat above, which had been watching and waiting, seized its chance and leaped onto my head, knocking me off balance. My claw lost its hold. We plummeted to the floor in a tangled heap. The grinding bowl, the small bucket inside it, and an empty jam jar, all went crashing down, knocking over the fire bucket, which spilled its contents onto the floor and into the water jar. The sudden cacophony in the dead of night startled even me, burglar. My master roared, bursting from the bedroom. He held a lamp in one hand and his walking stick in the other, his sleepy eyes gleaming with an intensity befitting the situation. I sat quietly beside the hearth, watching. The 2 rats scurried back into the cupboard. My master, brandishing his walking stick, shouted into the darkness, "Who's there? Who made that noise?" The moon had begun to set in the west, and the swathe of white light had narrowed. Chapter 6. This heat is unbearable, even for a cat. I'd like to shed my skin, my flesh, even my bones, just to cool off, like that Englishman, Sidney Smith, I think it was. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I wouldn't mind sending this mottled grey fur coat to the cleaners, or at least pawning it for the summer. Humans might think we cats have it easy, with the same face year-round, wearing the same coat through spring, summer, fall, and winter, living a simple, cost-effective life. But even cats feel the heat and cold. I wouldn't mind a bath every now and then, but drying this fur afterwards would be such a chore that I've endured the sweaty discomfort all these years without ever setting foot in a bathhouse. I've considered using a fan, but grasping one is beyond my capabilities. Humans are so spoiled. They cook food that could be eaten raw, boiling, grilling, pickling, and seasoning it in countless ways, congratulating each other on their ingenuity. And their clothes. While it might be unreasonable to expect imperfectly formed humans to wear the same outfit year-round like a cat, surely they don't need so many different garments. They burden themselves with wool from sheep, silk from silkworms, even cotton from the fields. Such extravagance seems almost like a consequence of their incompetence. I might forgive their excesses in food and clothing, but their extravagance extends to things that have no direct bearing on their survival. This is beyond my comprehension. Take the hair on their heads. It grows naturally, so leaving it alone would be the simplest and most beneficial approach. Yet, they go to great lengths to style it in various ways, taking great pride in the results. Those who call themselves monks always have shaved heads. When it's hot, they carry parasols. When it's cold, they wear hoods. What's the point of shaving your head if you're just going to cover it up? Then there are those who use a comb, a pointless, saw-like tool, to meticulously part their hair down the middle. If it's not perfectly centered, they create an artificial division on their skulls, sometimes extending this division past the crown of their head to the back. It looks like a fake banana leaf. Others shave the top of their heads flat and cut the sides straight. A square frame on a round head, it looks like a neatly trimmed hedge. I've heard there are also 5-point cuts, 3-point cuts, and even 1-point cuts. At this rate, they'll be shaving the backs of their heads and inventing -1-point cuts and -3-point cuts. What's the point of all this fuss? And why do they only use 2 legs when they have 4? Walking on 4 legs would be twice as fast. They always walk on 2, leaving the other 2 dangling uselessly like dried cod. It seems humans have far too much free time, inventing such frivolous activities to amuse themselves. The funny thing is, these idle creatures are always complaining about being busy, their faces etched with the strain of their supposed busyness. Some of them look at me and say, "It must be nice to be so carefree." Well, it is nice to be carefree. No one asked them to create so much unnecessary work for themselves. Complaining about being busy is like building a huge fire and then complaining about the heat. If cats started inventing 20 different hairstyles, we wouldn't be so carefree either. If you want to be carefree, learn to wear the same fur coat all year round, like me. That being said, it is rather hot. This fur coat is definitely too much. I can't even enjoy my afternoon nap. I thought I'd observe human society for a while. I've been neglecting my observational duties lately. I wanted to witness their amusingly frantic activities, but unfortunately, my master is remarkably cat-like in this regard. He's as fond of napping as I am, and especially since the summer holidays began, he hasn't done a single human-like task. Observing him is utterly pointless. If only Mighty would come, his sickly complexion might show some reaction, and he might, for a while at least, behave less like a cat. I was just thinking it was about time for him to arrive when I heard someone splashing water in the bathroom. Not just splashing, but singing loudly too. Ah, this is the life. Feels so good. One more bucket. His voice echoed throughout the house. Only Mighty would be so loud and inconsiderate in my master's house. Is finally here. This should keep me entertained for half a day, I thought. The sensei, wiping his brow, strode into the living room as usual, calling out, "Where's Kushami?" and tossing his hat onto the tatami mat. My mistress, who had been enjoying a nap beside her sewing box, was startled awake by his booming voice. She blinked sleepily, feigning wakefulness, and came out to greet him. Mighty, dressed in a Satsuma Jofu kimono, had already made himself comfortable and was fanning himself vigorously. "Oh, hello there," she said, slightly flustered. "I didn't hear you come in." She wiped the sweat from her nose. "I just arrived. I had Maya-san pour water over me in the bathroom. I barely survived. Isn't it hot? It has been terribly hot these past few days. I've been sweating even without moving." "You haven't changed a bit," he said, unfazed. "Thank you. The heat isn't enough to change me. But this heat is something else. I feel so sluggish. I haven't even been able to take a nap during the day, it's so hot. But I suppose even I take naps. That's good. Napping during the day, sleeping at night. What could be better?" he said cheerfully. As if that wasn't enough, he continued, "I don't want to sleep, I want to stay awake and be productive. I envy people like Kushami, who are always napping. Of course, this heat is tough on someone with a weak stomach. Even a healthy person like me finds it a burden to carry my head on my shoulders today." He gestured dramatically at his neck. "Well, since you still have something to carry on your head, I suppose you can't lie down. The weight of that mage alone must make you want to." My mistress, realizing that her disheveled hair had betrayed her nap, retorted, "Oh, you're terrible," and adjusted her hair. Mighty, oblivious, continued, "Yesterday, I fried an egg on the roof." "How did you do that?" "The roof tiles were so hot, it seemed a shame to waste them. I melted some butter and cracked an egg onto them. Oh my! But the sun doesn't cook as evenly as I'd hoped. It wouldn't cook through, so I came down to read the newspaper. Then a visitor came, and I completely forgot about it. This morning, I suddenly remembered and went up to check. And it wasn't even half-cooked, it had completely melted away. Oh dear." My mistress frowned in sympathy. "It's strange, it was so cool during the dog days of summer, and now it's suddenly so hot." "Indeed. Just the other day, I was cold even in a single layer, and now, crabs may walk sideways, but this year's weather is walking backwards. It's probably saying, even if I retreat and act perversely, so be it." "What do you mean?" "Oh, it's nothing. The way the weather is going back and forth reminds me of the cattle of Hercules. Emboldened, he continued his bizarre pronouncements. As expected, my mistress didn't understand. However, having learned her lesson from the walking backwards comment, she simply replied, "Oh," and didn't ask for further explanation. This disappointed Mighty, who had been hoping for a question. "Do you know about the cattle of Hercules?" "I don't believe I do. Would you like me to tell you the story?" My mistress couldn't very well refuse, so she agreed. Once upon a time, Hercules was herding cattle. So, Hercules was a cowherd? No, he wasn't a cowherd. He wasn't a shopkeeper either. This was back when there weren't any butchers in Greece. "Oh, it's a Greek story? You should have said so." My mistress, at least, knew what Greece was, but it's about Hercules. "So, if it's Hercules, it's Greek?" "Yes, Hercules is a Greek hero." That explains why I didn't know the story. "So, what did he do?" "Well, he got sleepy, like you were just now, and fell fast asleep." "Oh dear." "While he was sleeping, Vulcan's son came along." "Who's Vulcan?" "Vulcan is a blacksmith. This blacksmith's son stole the cattle. But instead of leading them away, he grabbed their tails and dragged them backwards." "Oh my." "So, when Hercules woke up, he couldn't find his cattle. He searched and searched, but he couldn't find them. He followed their tracks, but they led him in the wrong direction." The blacksmith's son was quite clever. Mighty had completely forgotten about the weather. "By the way, where's your husband?" "Still taking his afternoon nap." Napping is quite poetic when it appears in Chinese poetry, but making it a daily ritual like kushami is rather vulgar. It's like dying a little every day. Do you mind waking him up?" My mistress, apparently agreeing, said, "Yes, it's really quite troublesome. It's bad for his health. He just finished lunch." She started to get up. "Speaking of lunch, I haven't eaten yet," Mighty announced casually. "Oh my, I didn't realize it was so late." "Well, I don't have much, but I could make you some okazuke." "Don't trouble yourself, really. But there's nothing else I can offer you." "No, really, okazuke is fine, or even just yuzuke." Mighty, sensing her reluctance, quickly added, "Actually, I brought my own lunch. I'll just have that here." He said this with an air of nonchalance, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My mistress simply exclaimed, "Oh." Her "oh" contained a mixture of surprise, annoyance, and relief. Just then, my master emerged from his study, grumbling about the noise. He looked as if he had been rudely awakened from a pleasant dream, still so noisy. "I was just about to fall asleep," he grumbled, yawning. "Oh, you're awake? I apologize for disturbing your slumber. But it's good to wake up sometimes. Come, sit down." Mighty greeted him as if he were the host. My master sat down without a word, took out a cigarette from his inlaid wooden cigarette case, and lit it. He noticed Mighty's hat lying in the corner and said, "You bought a new hat. What do you think?" Mighty asked, holding it out proudly. "It's beautiful. The weave is so fine and soft," my mistress said, stroking it. "This hat is very useful. It does whatever I tell it to." He made a fist and punched the side of the Panama hat. Sure enough, a fist-sized dent appeared. Before my mistress could react, he punched it from the inside, making the crown bulge out like a kettle. Then he took the hat off, crushed the brim from both sides until it was flat like a rolled-out noodle, and rolled it up like a mat. "See," he said, tucking the rolled-up hat into his pocket. "Amazing." My mistress gasped, as if watching a magic trick. Mighty, encouraged, pulled the hat out of his pocket, this time from his left sleeve, and said, "No damage at all." He unrolled it, and the hat popped back into its original shape. He then balanced it on his index finger and spun it around. Just when I thought he was done, he tossed it into the air and sat on it. "Are you sure that's wise?" my master asked, sounding concerned. My mistress, worried, said, "It would be terrible if you broke such a beautiful hat." "That's enough now." Only the owner seemed to be enjoying himself, but that's the thing, it won't break. He pulled the crumpled hat from under him. It was completely flattened. He put it back on his head, and miraculously, it regained its original shape. It really is a sturdy hat. How is that possible? My mistress asked, impressed. It's nothing special, it's just how this hat is, Mighty replied, still wearing the hat. You should get a hat like that, my mistress suggested to my master, but Kashami already has a perfectly good straw hat. The children stepped on it and crushed it. Oh dear, that's unfortunate. So, I think you should get a sturdy and stylish one like this. Unaware of the price of a Panama hat, she continued, this one would be perfect for you, don't you think? Mighty then pulled a pair of scissors in a red case from his other sleeve and showed them to my mistress. Enough about the hat, take a look at these scissors. These are incredibly useful. They have 14 different functions. My master had been about to be subjected to further Panama hat persuasion, but thankfully, my mistress's innate feminine curiosity saved him. It was more luck than Mighty's quick thinking. 14 functions? How is that possible? She asked. Mighty, delighted, began his explanation. Listen carefully. See this crescent-shaped notch? You can use it to cut the tip off a cigar. And see this little contraption at the base? It's for cutting wire. If you lay it flat, it can be used as a ruler. There are markings on the back of the blade, so it can also be used as a measuring tape. This side has a file for your nails. See? If you stick the tip into the head of a screw and turn it, it can be used as a screwdriver. And if you really jam it in and pry, you can open almost any nailed-shut box. Wait, the tip of this blade is also a drill. And this part is for erasing mistakes. And if you take it apart, it becomes a knife. And finally, this is the most interesting part. See this little sphere, about the size of a fly's eye? Take a look. No, thank you. You're going to trick me again. You have no faith in me. Just take a peek. Come on, just a little peek. He handed the scissors to my mistress. Hesitantly, she took them and peered into the tiny sphere. It's just black. It shouldn't be black. Tilt it towards the light, that's it. Now can you see? Oh my, it's a photograph. How did they get such a small picture in there? That's the interesting part. My mistress and Mighty were engrossed in their discussion. My master, who had been silent until now, suddenly wanted to see the picture. Hey, let me see, he said. My mistress, with the scissors still pressed to her face, said, it's really quite beautiful. A nude woman. She made no move to hand them over. Hey, I said let me see. Just a minute. What lovely hair, it reaches her waist. She's looking up slightly, a tall woman, but very beautiful. I said let me see. My master was getting impatient. Here you go, take a good look. As she handed the scissors to my master, Maya-san came in from the kitchen carrying 2 trays of zaru soba. Here's my special treat. Excuse me, I'll just enjoy it here. Mighty bowed politely. His manner was a strange mix of sincerity and playfulness. My mistress, unsure how to respond, simply said, go ahead, and watched him. My master, finally tearing his gaze away from the photograph, said, soba in this heat? That's crazy. Don't worry, I don't usually get sick from eating what I like, Mighty replied, lifting the lid of the steaming basket. Freshly made soba is a blessing. There's nothing worse than soggy soba or dull company. He added wasabi and other condiments to the dipping sauce and stirred vigorously. That's too much wasabi, it'll be too spicy, my master warned. Soba is meant to be eaten with plenty of dipping sauce and wasabi. You don't like soba, do you? I prefer udon. Udon is for horse drivers. It's a shame you don't appreciate the taste of good soba. He plunged his chopsticks into the basket and lifted a large clump of noodles, raising them 2 inches above the basket. There are many ways to eat soba. Beginners tend to drench it in sauce and chew it noisily. That ruins the flavor. You should pick up a small amount like this, he demonstrated, lifting his chopsticks. A long strand of soba dangled precariously in the air. Mighty glanced down and saw that a dozen or so strands were still clinging to the bottom of the basket. These are long ones. What do you think, about this length? He asked, seeking her approval. They are quite long, she replied, seemingly impressed. You dip about 1/3 of the length in the sauce and slurp it down in one gulp. Don't chew. Chewing ruins the flavor. The key is the smooth glide down your throat. He lifted the chopsticks high, and the soba finally left the basket. He lowered the noodles into his bowl, dipping the ends into the sauce. According to Archimedes' principle, The level of sauce in the bowl should have risen in proportion to the volume of soba immersed. However, the bowl was already almost full, so before half of the soba had been submerged, the sauce overflowed. Mighty's chopsticks froze in midair, 5 inches above the bowl. He couldn't lower them any further without spilling the sauce. He hesitated for a moment, then, with a swift, rabbit-like motion, brought his mouth to the chopsticks. A loud slurp, a couple of gulps, and the soba was gone. Tears streamed from his eyes. Whether from the wasabi or the effort of swallowing, I couldn't say. Impressive. I can't believe you swallowed it all at once, my master said, admiringly. Amazing, my mistress echoed. Mighty, without a word, put down his chopsticks and patted his chest a few times. You should be able to finish a basket in 3.5 or 4 bites. Taking your time ruins the experience. He wiped his mouth with a handkerchief and took a breath. Just then, Mr. Kanzuki arrived, wearing his winter hat despite the heat, his shoes covered in dust. For some reason, he always wore that hat. Well, if it isn't the handsome scholar. Excuse me, I was just finishing my meal, Mighty said, and proceeded to devour the remaining soba. This time, he didn't put on a show, he simply finished both baskets quickly and efficiently, without pausing for breath or wiping his mouth. Kanzuki, is your dissertation finished yet? My master asked. Miss Kaneda is waiting impatiently, you should submit it soon, Mighty added. Kanzuki, with his usual weak smile, replied, I would like to finish it as soon as possible and put her mind at ease, but the topic is rather complex and requires extensive research. He spoke as if it were a serious matter, though it didn't sound like one. Yes, the topic being the topic, it can't be rushed. Although, with that nose, it's certainly worth sniffing around, Mighty said, offering a Kanzuki-style greeting. My master, comparatively serious, asked, what's the topic of your dissertation? The influence of ultraviolet rays on the electromotive action of the frog's eye. How peculiar. As expected of Kanzuki-sensei. The frog's eye is vibrating. Kushami, you should inform the Kaneda family about the topic before the dissertation is even finished. Ignoring Mighty, my master asked Kanzuki, is that really such a difficult topic? Yes, it's quite complex. The structure of the frog's eye lens isn't so simple. I need to conduct various experiments, but first I need to create a spherical glass lens. Can't you just buy one from a glassblower? No, because, Kanzuki started, then corrected himself, realizing the contradiction. Circles and straight lines are geometric concepts. Perfectly ideal circles and straight lines don't exist in the real world. If they don't exist, you should give up, Mighty interjected. So, I'm trying to create a spherical lens that's good enough for experimental purposes. I've been working on it for a while now. Have you made any progress? My master asked. For some reason. How can I? Kanzuki replied, then corrected himself again, it's quite difficult. I grind and grind, thinking this side's radius is too long, so I grind the other side a little, and then suddenly that side becomes too long. I finally manage to even it out, and then the whole shape becomes distorted. I fix the distortion, and then the diameter is off. I started with a piece of glass the size of an apple, and now it's the size of a strawberry. Even then, it's still not a perfect sphere. I've been working diligently. I've ground down 6 pieces of glass since New Year's. It was impossible to tell whether he was being serious or not. Where do you do all this grinding? In the laboratory at the university, of course. I start in the morning, take a break for lunch, and then grind until it gets dark. It's quite tiring. So, when you say you're busy and go to the university even on Sundays, it's to grind glass. Yes, I've been grinding glass all day, every day. He became a doctor of lens making, something like that. But with such dedication, even that nose will be impressed. Actually, I ran into Rubai at the library the other day. It's strange to see him at the library after graduation. I thought he must be studying hard, but he said, no, I was just passing by and needed to use the restroom. I laughed out loud. You and Rubai are perfect opposites. I should include you both in a revised version of the MGY as examples. Mighty, as usual, added a lengthy commentary, and Y Master, slightly more serious, asked, it's all well and good to spend your days grinding glass, but when do you plan to finish? At this rate, it'll probably take about 10 years. Kanzuki seemed even more laid back than my master. 10 years? You should try to finish sooner. 10 years is optimistic, it might even take 20. That's a long time. You'll never get your doctorate at this rate. I want to finish as soon as possible and put her mind at ease, but I can't conduct my experiments until I have the lens. Kanzuki paused, then said with a smug look, there's no need to worry. Miss Kaneda is well aware that I'm diligently grinding my lens. I explained the situation to her just a few days ago. My mistress, who had been listening to their conversation with a puzzled look, suddenly said, but the entire Kaneda family went to Oiso last month for the summer. Kanzuki, taken aback, said evasively, that's strange. I wonder what happened. Mighty, always ready to fill a conversational gap, jumped in. Meeting someone in Tokyo a few days ago who went to Oiso last month is quite mystical. A spiritual exchange, perhaps? Such phenomena often occur when feelings of love are strong. It might sound like a dream, but it's a dream more real than reality. You, married to Kusami without any such passionate feelings, wouldn't understand. What makes you so sure? You're being very presumptuous, my mistress retorted, turning on Mighty. You don't seem to have ever suffered from lovesickness either, my master added, supporting his wife. Well, even I have had my romantic adventures, but they're all more than 75 days old, so you might not remember. In fact, I'm still single because of a broken heart, he declared, looking at each of them in turn. How amusing, my mistress said sarcastically. Don't be ridiculous, my master said, turning his gaze to the garden. Only Kanzuki, as promised, remained silent, looking eager to hear more. My story is quite mystical. I would have told it to Lafcadio Hearn, I'm sure he would have enjoyed it. But sadly, he's passed away, so there's no point. But since you're so eager, I'll tell you. But you must listen attentively to the very end, he warned. This happened, let's see, how many years ago? Oh, never mind, let's just say 15 or 16 years ago. Don't be absurd, my master scoffed. Your memory is terrible, my mistress teased. Kanzuki, true to his word, remained silent, eager for the story to continue. It was a winter's day, and I was traveling through Takanoko-dani in Kambura District, Echigo Province, crossing the Takatsubo Pass on my way to Aizu. What a strange place, my master interrupted. Be quiet and listen, it's a good story, my mistress scolded. It was getting dark, I had lost my way, and I was hungry. I had no choice but to knock on the door of a lonely house on the pass and ask for shelter. Please, I'm lost and hungry, could you let me stay the night? I pleaded. Certainly, a young woman replied, holding a candle to my face. When I saw her face, I trembled. Oh dear, are there beautiful women even in such remote places? Whether in the mountains or by the sea, you wouldn't believe how beautiful she was. Her hair was styled in a magnificent Tokushima da. Oh my mistress was captivated. Inside, there was a large irori fireplace in the center of the 8-mat room. The young woman, her grandparents, and I sat around it. You must be hungry, they said. Anything will do, please, just give me something to eat, I begged. The old man said, since you're our guest, we'll make you some snake rice. Now, this is where the story of my heartbreak begins, so listen carefully. Even in Echigo, there wouldn't be any snakes in winter, my master interrupted. That's a valid question. But you can't be so logical when it comes to a poetic story like this. In Kyoka Izumi's stories, crabs emerge from the snow, don't they? Kanzuki nodded seriously, and Mighty continued. Back then, I was quite the adventurous eater. I had grown tired of locusts, slugs, and even bullfrogs, so snake rice sounded intriguing. That would be wonderful, I told the old man. He put a pot over the irori and added rice. The lid had 10 or so holes in it, and steam was puffing out. What a clever design, I thought, quite impressive for a countryside home. Then the old man went out and came back with a large basket. He placed it by the irori, and when I peeked inside, there they were. A writhing mass of snakes, coiled together to keep warm. Please, stop. It's disgusting. My mistress wrinkled her nose, but this is the crucial part of the heartbreak story, I can't skip it. The old man took the lid off the pot with his left hand and, with his right hand, grabbed a handful of snakes and tossed them into the pot. He quickly put the lid back on. Even I was taken aback. Stop it, I feel sick, my mistress pleaded. We're almost at the heartbreak part, just bear with me. A minute or so later, a snake's head popped out of one of the holes in the lid. Oh, there's one, I thought. Then another head popped out of another hole. And another, and another. Soon, the lid was covered in snake heads. Why were they sticking their heads out? The pot was hot, they were trying to escape. The old man said, "That's enough, let's pull them out." The old woman replied, "Yes." The young woman said, "All right." Then each of them grabbed a snake's head and pulled. The flesh remained in the pot, but the bones came out cleanly. It was quite fascinating to see the long bones sliding out. Like boning a snake, Kanzuki commented with a chuckle. Exactly. Quite skillful, wasn't it? Then they took the lid off the pot, stirred the rice and snake meat with a ladle, and said, "Here you go." "Did you eat it?" my master asked, unfazed. My mistress, grimacing, said, "Stop it already. I feel sick, I can't eat anything now." "You say that because you've never eaten snake rice. You should try it sometime, You'll never forget the taste." "No, thank you. I'd never eat such a thing." Anyway, I ate my fill, feeling warm and content, no longer shy about looking at the young woman. I thought I had nothing to worry about. "Good night," they said, so I lay down and, I'm ashamed to admit, fell fast asleep. And then, my mistress prompted, the next morning is when the heartbreak happened. What happened? Nothing much, really. I woke up, had a cigarette, and looked out the back window. I saw a kettle washing its face by the bamboo pipe. The old man or the old woman, my master asked. I couldn't tell at first. I watched for a while, and when the kettle turned around, I was shocked. It was the young woman I had fallen in love with the night before. "But you said her hair was styled in a Tokushima die." "Yes, the night before, it was. A magnificent Tokushima die. But the next morning, it was a kettle." "You're making fun of me." My master rolled his eyes. I was also quite puzzled, and a little scared, so I continued to watch. The kettle finished washing its face, picked up a Tokushima die wig from a nearby rock, put it on, and calmly went back inside. I see, I thought. But from that moment on, I was destined for a life of unrequited love. What a ridiculous heartbreak story. See, Kanzuki? That's why you're so cheerful and full of energy, even after being heartbroken. My master turned to Kanzuki, commenting on Mighty's story. If the girl hadn't been a kettle and he had brought her back to Tokyo, he might have been even more energetic. It's a shame she was bald. Why would such a young woman lose her hair, I wonder? I've thought about it a lot, and I'm sure it's because she ate too much snake rice. Snake rice makes your blood rush to your head. But you seem perfectly fine. I didn't go bald, but I did become nearsighted. He took off his gold-rimmed glasses and carefully wiped them with a handkerchief. After a while, my master suddenly asked, what was so mystical about it? I still can't figure out where she got that wig. Did she buy it, or find it? That's the mystical part, Mighty replied, putting his glasses back on. It's like listening to a Rakugo story. My mistress commented. Mighty's story seemed to have reached its conclusion, but he was incapable of silence. He started another story. My heartbreak was a bitter experience, but if I had married that kettle, she would have been a lifelong burden. Marriage is a risky business. You might discover a hidden flaw just as you're about to tie the knot. Kanzuki, you shouldn't be so sentimental and lovesick. Just focus on polishing your lens. I'd like to, but she won't let me, Kanzuki replied with a sigh, feigning exasperation. You're lucky she's the one making a fuss. There are more ridiculous cases. Take Rubai, the one who uses the library as a restroom. His story is quite peculiar. What did he do? My master asked, intrigued. Well, it's like this. He once stayed at the Tazaikan Inn in Shizuoka, just for one night. And that very night, he proposed to the maid. What? My master looked surprised. So did my mistress and Kanzuki. They all tilted their heads in unison. Mighty continued, undeterred. I'm pretty impulsive, but even I wouldn't do something like that. Of course, the inn was famous for its beautiful onatsu, and she happened to be the one serving Rubai, so it's somewhat understandable. It sounds just like your mountain pass story. It's a bit similar. Rubai and I aren't so different. Anyway, he proposed to Onatsu, and before he even got an answer, he wanted to eat some watermelon. What? My master looked even more surprised. He called Onatsu and asked if they had any watermelon in Shizuoka. Of course, we have watermelon in Shizuoka, she replied and brought him a whole plateful. He ate it all, waiting for her answer. But before she replied, he got a terrible stomachache. He groaned and moaned, but it didn't help, so he called Onatsu again and asked if there were any doctors in Shizuoka. Of course, we have doctors in Shizuoka, she replied and brought a doctor with a name that sounded like it was stolen from the 1,000-character classic. The next morning, his stomachache was gone, thankfully. Just 15 minutes before he was about to leave, he called Onatsu and asked for her answer. She laughed and said, "We have watermelon in Shizuoka, and we have doctors, but we don't have brides made in a single night." Then she left and never showed her face again. So, Rubai was heartbroken, just like me, and he stopped visiting the library except to use the restroom. Women are such cruel creatures. My master, surprisingly energetic, responded, "They certainly are. I was reading a play by Musset the other day, and one of the characters, quoting a Roman poet, said, 'Lighter than a feather is dust, lighter than dust is wind, lighter than wind is woman, lighter than woman is nothing.'" How insightful. Women are hopeless. My mistress, of course, objected. "You say it's bad for women to be fickle, but it's not good for men to be dense, either." Dense? What do you mean? Dense? Like you. What's dense about me? You're dense. A strange argument ensued. Mighty, amused, commented, "That's the reality of marriage, isn't it? Bickering like that. Marriage in the old days must have been terribly dull." Whether he was mocking them or complimenting them was unclear. He could have left it at that, but he continued his rambling. "They say that in the old days, wives never talked back to their husbands. That sounds like being married to a mute, which wouldn't be appealing at all. I'd rather have a wife like yours, who tells me, 'You're dense.' It would be boring to be married without an occasional argument. My mother was always so meek and submissive in front of my father. They were married for 20 years, and she never went anywhere except to the temple. It was pathetic. Of course, thanks to that, she memorized all our ancestors' posthumous Buddhist names. Social interactions between men and women were also quite different. When I was a child, we couldn't have mixed-gender musical performances or spiritual exchanges like Kanzuki, meeting in a dreamlike state. How unfortunate, Kanzuki said, bowing his head. It was unfortunate. And women back then weren't necessarily more virtuous than they are today. People are always complaining about the loose morals of female students these days, but it was much worse in the past. Really? My mistress seemed genuinely surprised. It's true. I have proof. Kashami, you might remember this, but when we were 5 or 6 years old, girls were sold in baskets, carried on shoulder poles, like pumpkins. Remember? I don't remember that, my master said. I don't know about your hometown, but it was certainly true in Shizuoka. No way, my mistress muttered. Really? Kanzuki asked, sounding unconvinced. It's true. My father even appraised one once. I was about 6 years old. I was walking with him from Aburamachi to Torimachi, and we heard someone shouting, "Girls for sale! Girls for sale!" We caught up with him in front of Isogen, a kimono shop. Isogen was the largest kimono shop in Shizuoka, with a 10-ken storefront and 5 warehouses. You should go see it sometime, it's still there. A magnificent building. The manager, Jinbei, always looked as if his mother had died 3 days earlier. Next to him sat Hatsu, a young clerk of about 24 or 25, with a pale face, as if he had been fasting on soba broth for 21 days as a religious practice. Next to Hatsu was Chodo, the head clerk, looking as if he had just lost everything in a fire. And next to Chodo. Are you talking about the kimono shop, or the girl seller? Right, the girl seller. Actually, there's a rather interesting story about Isogen, but I'll save that for another time. Anyway, we reached the front of Isogen, and the girl seller, seeing my father, said, "Sir, how about a nice young girl? I'll give you a good price." He put down his shoulder pole and wiped his sweat. There were 2 girls in the baskets, both about 2 years old. My father tapped their heads and said, sounds solid. Then they started haggling over the price. Finally, my father asked, "Are they healthy?" The girl seller replied, "The one in front is fine, I've been watching her closely, but I haven't seen the other one's face, so she might be damaged. I can't guarantee her, but I'll give you a discount." I still remember that conversation. Even as a child, I thought, women are truly unreliable creatures. But in the 38th year of Meiji, no one would be so foolish as to sell girls in baskets, or say things like, "I can't guarantee the one I haven't seen." So, I believe that thanks to Western civilization, women's morals have greatly improved. What do you think, Kanzuki? Kanzuki cleared his throat theatrically before replying in a calm, low voice. Women these days sell themselves, walking to and from school, attending concerts, charity events, and garden parties, saying, "Buy me, buy me." So, there's no need for vulgar peddlers shouting, "Girls for sale." It's a natural consequence of the development of independent thought. Older people might worry about it, but it's a sign of progress, and I, for one, welcome it. And buyers don't tap their heads and ask, "Are they healthy?" anymore, so you can rest assured. In today's complex world, such methods would be impractical. People would never get married. Kanzuki, a true youth of the 20th century, expounded his modern views and blew a puff of Shikishima cigarette smoke in Mighty's face. Mighty was unfazed. "You're right. Female students and young ladies these days are self-confident and independent, and I admire their spirit. The students at the girls' school near my house are quite something. They wear short sleeves and swing from the horizontal bars. It's impressive. Every time I watch them exercising from my second-floor window, I'm reminded of the women of ancient Greece." "Greece again," my master muttered sarcastically. "Well, most beautiful things originated in Greece. Aesthetics and Greece are inseparable. Especially when I see that dark-skinned student exercising with such dedication, I always think of the story of Agnidis." "Another difficult name," Kanzuki said, still smirking. "Agnidis was a remarkable woman. I was truly impressed. At the time, Athenian law forbade women from practicing midwifery. How inconvenient. Agnidis also felt this inconvenience. It's unfair that women can't be midwives. I want to be a midwife. How can I become one?" she wondered, and she pondered this for 3 days and 3 nights. On the morning of the 3rd day, she heard a baby crying in the next house, and suddenly, it came to her. She immediately cut her hair short, put on men's clothes, and attended Hierophilus's lectures. She successfully completed the course, and confident in her skills, she started practicing midwifery. And, her business boomed. Babies were born left and right, all thanks to Agnidis. But life is full of ups and downs. Her secret was eventually discovered, and she was accused of violating the law and faced severe punishment. It sounds just like a Rakugo story. Isn't it fascinating? But the women of Athens signed a petition pleading for her release. The authorities couldn't ignore such a plea, so Agnidis was acquitted, and a new law was passed, allowing women to practice midwifery. And they all lived happily ever after. You're so knowledgeable, it's amazing. I know most things. The only thing I don't know is how foolish I am. But even that, I suspect. Ha ha ha, you're so amusing. My mistress burst out laughing. Just then, the doorbell rang, the same jarring sound as always. "Oh, another visitor," she said, and retreated to the living room. The visitor who entered was none other than Mr. Toho Oki. With Toho's arrival, the cast of eccentrics frequenting my master's house was complete. I couldn't ask for more. If I had been unfortunate enough to be born into another household, I might have lived my entire life without ever encountering such characters. Thankfully, as a cat of the Kushami household, I have the privilege of witnessing the words and deeds of these unique individuals, from my master to Mighty, Kanzuki, and even Toho, each a formidable character rarely seen even in a city as vast as Tokyo. Thanks to them, I can forget the discomfort of my fur coat in this heat and enjoyably while away the days. With such a gathering, something interesting was bound to happen. I watched from behind the sliding door, eager for the entertainment to begin. "It's been a while," Toho said, bowing politely. His head was still as shiny as the last time I saw him. From the head up, he looked like a kabuki actor, but he was wearing a stiff, white kokura hakama, which made him look like a disciple of Kenkichi Sakakibara. The only normal-looking part of him was from his shoulders to his waist. "It's good to see you, despite the heat." Come in, Mighty greeted him as if it were his own house. It's been a while since I last saw you. Yes, I believe it was at the poetry reading in the spring. Speaking of poetry readings, are they still popular? Have you become a shrine maiden yet? That was a good one, I applauded enthusiastically. Did you notice? Yes, thanks to your encouragement, I managed to finish. When is your next performance? My master asked. I'm taking a break in July and August, but I'm planning something big for September. Do you have any interesting ideas? Not really, my master replied indifferently. Toho, why don't you perform one of my works? Kanzuki suggested. Your work? That would be interesting. What is it? A play, Kanzuki said, trying to sound important. As expected, this caught their attention. They all looked at him. A play? Excellent. A comedy or a tragedy? Toho asked, stepping forward. Kanzuki, looking even more self-important, replied, neither. People are always talking about old plays and new plays, so I've created something entirely new, a haiku play. A haiku play? What's that? It's a play based on the aesthetics of haiku. Since it's based on haiku, I thought it shouldn't be too long or complicated, so I made it a one-act play. I see. Let's start with the stage setting. It should be very simple. A large willow tree in the center of the stage. A branch extending to the right, with a crow perched on it. What if the crow doesn't stay put? My master worried. We'll tie its feet to the branch with string. And underneath the crow, a bath basin. A beautiful woman is bathing, facing sideways, using a washcloth. That's a bit decadent. Who will play the woman? Mighty asked. That's easy. We'll hire a model from the art school. The police might object to that, my master worried. We won't be putting on a public performance, so it shouldn't be a problem. If they object to that, they should ban nude figure drawing in art schools. But that's for practice, it's different from just looking. If you say so, then Japan is still a backwards country. Painting and theater are both art forms. Kanzuki's voice rose in indignation. All right, let's hear the rest of the play, Toho said, seemingly interested in the idea. Now, a haiku poet, Kiyoshi Takahama, enters from the Hanamichi, flower walk. He's wearing a white pith helmet, a sheer linen hari jacket, Satsuma Gasui hakama tucked up at the ankles, and half boots, like a military officer. He should walk slowly and calmly, as if composing a haiku in his head. As he reaches the main stage, he looks up and sees the willow tree, the woman bathing in its shade, and the crow perched on the branch, watching her. He's struck by the poetic scene. He pauses for about 50 seconds, then recites in a loud voice, a crow in love with the bathing woman? Then the clappers sound, and the curtain falls. What do you think? Don't you like it? You'd be much better off playing Kiyoshi than a shrine maiden. Toho, looking unconvinced, replied, it's too abrupt. I'd prefer something with more human drama. Mighty, who had been relatively quiet, finally spoke. Calling that a haiku play is absurd. According to Bin Ueda, haiku and humor are passive and decadent, signs of a nation in decline. He had a point. Don't perform such a dull play. Ueda would laugh at you. It's too passive and pointless. No offense, Kanzuki, but you're better off polishing your lens in the laboratory. Even if you write 100 or 200 haiku plays, they'll still be decadent. Kanzuki, slightly offended, said, is it really that passive? I intended it to be quite active. Kiyoshi saying, a crow in love with the bathing woman? Attributing his own feelings to the crow, is quite active, don't you think? That's a novel interpretation. Please, explain. From a scientific perspective, it's illogical for a crow to be in love with a woman. Indeed. But Kiyoshi states it as if it were perfectly natural. Really? My master interjected doubtfully. Kanzuki continued, undeterred. The reason it sounds natural is because it's a psychological projection. The feeling of love belongs to the poet, not the crow. But Kiyoshi, seeing the crow perched on the branch, staring down at the woman, mistakenly assumes that the crow shares his feelings. It's a misunderstanding, but that's what makes it literary and active. Projecting his own feelings onto the crow is a very active act. What do you think? That's an interesting interpretation. Kiyoshi would be surprised. The explanation is active, but the play itself is passive. Don't you think so, Toho? Yes, it's too passive, Toho replied seriously. My master, wanting to change the subject, asked, Toho, have you written any masterpieces lately? Nothing worth mentioning, but I'm planning to publish a poetry collection soon. I've brought the manuscript, perhaps you could critique it. He pulled a purple silk-wrapped bundle from his pocket, unfolded it, and took out a notebook containing 50 or 60 pages of manuscript paper. He handed it to my master. My master put on a serious face and said, "Let me see." The first page read, "Unlike anyone else, you appear so frail. Dedicated to Miss Fujiko." My master looked at the page with a puzzled expression, saying nothing. Mighty, peeking over his shoulder, said, "Is it free verse?" He continued reading aloud, "Dedicated, eh? Toho, dedicating it to Miss Fujiko is a bold move." My master, still puzzled, asked, "Toho, is this Miss Fujiko a real person?" "Yes, she's one of the women we invited to the poetry reading. She lives nearby. I was just on my way to show her the manuscript, but she's gone to Oiso for the summer. Kushami, this is the 20th century. Don't look so surprised. Read us a poem." "But Toho, the dedication is a bit awkward. What does frail mean in this context?" "I meant delicate or feeble." "That's one interpretation, but the original meaning is closer to precarious." "I wouldn't write it that way." "How would you write it to make it more poetic?" "I would write, unlike anyone else, you appear so frail beneath your nose, dedicated to Miss Fujiko. Just 3 extra words, but the addition of beneath your nose adds a whole new dimension." "I see," Toho said, pretending to understand. My master turned the page and began reading the first chapter. "Weary, in the fragrant air, your spirit. Like lingering smoke, a shared longing. I, in this bitter world. Sweetly received a passionate kiss. I don't quite understand this," my master said with a sigh, handing the manuscript to Mighty. "It's a bit too dramatic," Mighty said, passing it to Kanzuki. "I see," Kanzuki said, handing it back to Toho. "It's understandable that you don't quite grasp it, sensei. Poetry has evolved considerably in the past 10 years. Modern poetry can't be understood by reading it lying down or at a train station. Even the poets themselves struggle to explain their work. We write purely from inspiration, so we bear no responsibility for interpretation. Annotations and explanations are for scholars, not for us. A friend of mine, Sōseki, recently wrote a short story called One Night. It was so vague and disjointed that no one could understand it. I asked him to explain it, but he said, 'I don't know,' and refused to elaborate. That's the nature of a true artist." "He sounds like a strange fellow," my master said. "He's an idiot," Mighty said, dismissing Sōseki. Toho, feeling the need to defend himself, said, "Sōseki is an outlier, even among us. But I would appreciate it if you could read my poems with an open mind. I put a lot of effort into contrasting Bitter World and Sweet Kiss. The effort is apparent. The contrast between sweet and bitter, like a 17-spice chili pepper blend, is quite intriguing. It's a unique technique, truly admirable," Mighty said, showering him with insincere praise. My master suddenly stood up and went to his study. He returned with a sheet of paper. "I've read your work, Toho, so now I'll read you a short piece of mine. I'd appreciate your critique." He seemed to be serious this time. "I've already heard your epitaph for the natural recluse 2 or 3 times. Be quiet. Toho, this isn't my best work, but I wrote it for amusement. Please, listen." "I'd be delighted." "Kanzuki, you should listen too." "I will, even if you don't tell me to." "It's not very long, is it?" "Just over 60 characters." Kushami began reading his masterpiece. Yamato Spirit coughs the Japanese man, as if afflicted with consumption. "A striking opening." Kanzuki praised Yamato Spirit, says the newspaper vendor. Yamato Spirit, says the pickpocket. Yamato Spirit leaps across the ocean. Lectures on Yamato Spirit in England. Yamato Spirit plays on stage in Germany. "This is even better than the natural recluse," Mighty exclaimed, leaning back. "Admiral Togo possesses Yamato Spirit. Jin-san the fishmonger possesses Yamato Spirit. Con men, swindlers, and murderers all possess Yamato Spirit. Sensei, You should add Kanzuki to that list. Mighty suggested, what is Yamato spirit? I asked. Yamato spirit, he replied, and walked away. After 5 or 6 ken, I heard him cough. That line is excellent. You're quite talented. What's the next line? Is Yamato spirit triangular or square? Yamato spirit, as the name suggests, is a spirit. Being a spirit, it's always wavering. It's quite amusing, sensei, but isn't there a bit too much Yamato spirit? Toho pointed out. I agree. Mighty added, everyone speaks of it, but no one has seen it. Everyone has heard of it, but no one has encountered it. Is Yamato spirit a kind of Tengu? My master finished reading, his voice trailing off. But the piece was so short and its meaning so obscure that the other 3 waited expectantly, thinking there was more to come. When he remained silent, Kanzuki finally asked, is that all? Yes, my master replied casually. Surprisingly, Mighty didn't offer his usual lengthy commentary. He turned to my master and said, you should compile your short pieces into a collection and dedicate it to someone. Should I dedicate it to you? My master asked. Absolutely not. Mighty retorted, and began clipping his nails with the scissors he had shown my mistress earlier. Kanzuki turned to Toho and asked, do you know Miss Kaneda? We've become quite close since I invited her to the poetry reading. Whenever I'm with her, I feel inspired, and I can write poems and songs with ease. Many of the poems in this collection are love poems, inspired by her. I'm deeply grateful to her, so I've decided to dedicate this collection to her. They say that great poetry cannot be written without the influence of a female friend. Is that so? Kanzuki replied, chuckling to himself. Even a gathering of eccentrics couldn't last forever. The conversation began to wind down. Feeling no obligation to listen to their unchanging chatter all day, I excused myself and went out to the garden to look for praying mantises. The setting sun, filtering through the leaves of the Paulownia tree, cast dappled shadows on the ground, and a cicada chirped incessantly on the trunk. It might rain tonight. Chapter 7. I've recently taken up exercise. You might scoff, exercise? For a cat, but even humans, until recently, didn't understand the value of exercise. They considered eating and sleeping to be their primary occupations. They prized tranquility and inactivity, rarely moving their deteriorating backsides from their cushions, considering such indolence to be a mark of respectability. This recent obsession with exercise, cold baths, sea bathing, and summer retreats to the mountains to eat the mist is a disease imported from the West. It's as bad as the plague, consumption, or neurasthenia. Of course, being only 1 year old, I don't remember the time before this disease infected our sacred land. In fact, I probably wasn't even a twinkle in my mother's eye. But 1 cat year is equivalent to 10 human years. Although our lifespans are shorter than humans, we develop much faster. Comparing human years to cat years is a grave mistake. Just look at me. I'm only 1 year old, and already I possess such wisdom. My master's 3rd daughter is 3 years old, but in terms of intellectual development, she's far behind. All she does is cry, wet herself, and drink milk. Compared to me, who worries about the state of the world, she's a simple creature. Therefore, it should come as no surprise that I possess a comprehensive understanding of the history of exercise, sea bathing, and convalescence. Anyone surprised by this must be a slow-witted, 2-legged human. Humans have always been slow-witted. That's why they're only now realizing the benefits of exercise and sea bathing, touting them as great discoveries. I've known about these things since before I was born. The benefits of sea bathing are obvious. Just look at the fish in the ocean. There are countless fish, and not a single one of them has ever seen a doctor. They're all perfectly healthy. If a fish gets sick, it can't swim. If it dies, it floats. That's why we say a fish rises when it dies, a bird falls, and a human passes away. Ask anyone who has crossed the Indian Ocean, have you ever seen a dead fish? They'll all say no. Of course, they haven't. No matter how many times they've crossed the ocean, they've never seen a fish floating belly up, having just breathed its last, or rather, having swallowed its last tide. Given that not a single dead fish has ever been found in the vast expanse of the ocean, despite the constant churning of steamships burning coal day and night, it's safe to conclude that fish are incredibly healthy. And why are they so healthy? It's obvious. They're constantly bathed in seawater. The benefits of sea bathing are clearly evident in fish. And if it's beneficial for fish, it must be beneficial for humans as well. Dr. Richard Russell was late to the game when he advertised the healing properties of Brighton's seawater in 1750, claiming that all 404 diseases could be cured instantly. Even cats would flock to Kamakura for a dip in the ocean if the opportunity arose. But not now. There's a time and place for everything. Just as the Japanese before the Meiji Restoration died without experiencing the benefits of sea bathing, we cats haven't yet reached the evolutionary stage where we can jump into the ocean naked. Haste makes waste. Until the day comes when we cats have developed sufficient resistance to the raging waves, in other words, until we say a cat rises instead of dies, we can't go sea bathing. I'll put off sea bathing for now, but I've decided to take up exercise. In the 20th century, not exercising is seen as something for the poor, quite shameful. It's not that I don't want to exercise. It's that I can't. I don't have the time, the resources. In the past, those who exercised were ridiculed, but now, those who don't exercise are considered inferior. Human values change with the times, like the size of my pupils. My pupils only dilate and constrict, but human values can flip completely. But that's fine. Everything has two sides, two extremes. Flipping between these extremes is what makes humans so adaptable. There's a certain charm in seeing a square become a rectangle when viewed upside down. A monohashadate looks quite different when viewed from between your legs. Shakespeare wouldn't be Shakespeare if he were always revered. Occasionally, someone needs to look at Hamlet from between their legs and say, "This is rubbish." Otherwise, literature wouldn't progress. So, it's not surprising that those who once criticized exercise are now embracing it, even women running around with tennis rackets. Just don't laugh at a cat for exercising. So, what kind of exercise do I do? You might be curious. As you know, I don't have access to equipment, so balls and bats are out of the question. And I don't have any money to buy them. Therefore, my chosen form of exercise requires neither equipment nor money. You might think I simply stroll around or run with a piece of tuna in my mouth. But simply moving my four legs in accordance with the laws of physics, traversing the earth in response to gravity, is too simple and uninteresting. Just moving for the sake of moving, like my master sometimes does, seems to desecrate the sanctity of exercise. Of course, even simple movements can be stimulating under the right circumstances. Chasing dried bonito flakes or hunting salmon is quite enjoyable, but those require external stimuli. Without the thrill of the chase, they become dull and pointless. So, I wanted to find a more skillful form of exercise. I considered several options. Jumping from the kitchen eaves to the roof. Balancing on the plum blossom-shaped tiles at the peak of the roof. Walking across the clothesline. This proved impossible, the bamboo was too slippery. Pouncing on the children from behind. This is quite entertaining, but it often leads to unpleasant consequences, so I only do it 3 times a month at most. Having a paper bag placed over my head. This is more annoying than enjoyable, and it requires a human accomplice. Scratching book covers. This risks incurring my master's wrath, and it only exercises my paws, not my whole body. These are what I call old-fashioned exercises. My new-fashioned exercises are much more stimulating. First, mantis hunting. Mantis hunting isn't as strenuous as rat hunting, but it's also less dangerous. It's the perfect pastime for late summer and early autumn. The method is as follows. I go out into the garden and find a praying mantis. When the season is right, finding one or two is easy. I approach the mantis stealthily and pounce. The mantis, startled, raises its forelegs menacingly. It's quite brave, ready to defend itself, unaware of my superior strength. I bat its forelegs aside with my right paw. The mantis's head, being soft, bends easily. Its expression at this moment is quite amusing. It clearly thinks, "What's happening?" Then, I quickly move behind it and gently scratch its wings. Its carefully folded wings unfold, revealing delicate, translucent underwings. Even in summer, it wears 2 layers, quite stylish. The mantis's long neck swivels around. Sometimes it tries to attack, But usually it just freezes, waiting for my next move. If it stays like this, the exercise becomes pointless, so after a while, I bat its head again. Any sensible mantis would flee at this point. Only an uneducated, barbaric mantis would continue to attack. If it does, I swat it away. It usually flies a few feet. But if it wisely retreats, I take pity and run around the trees in the garden a few times, like a bird in flight. The mantis hasn't gotten far, only 5 or 6 inches. It knows my strength now and has lost the will to fight. It just runs around frantically, trying to escape. But I chase after it relentlessly. Eventually, it spreads its wings and tries to fly. A mantis's wings, in harmony with its long neck, are beautifully elongated, but they're purely decorative, like a human's knowledge of English, French, or German, completely impractical. Its desperate attempt at flight is futile against me. It flaps its wings and drags itself along the ground. I feel a twinge of pity, but exercise is exercise. I dart in front of it and swat its head. The mantis collapses, wings spread. I pin it down with my paw and rest for a while. Then I let it go, only to pin it down again. I toy with it, like Zhuge Liang's 7 captures, 7 releases strategy. After about 30 minutes of this, when it's completely exhausted, I pick it up gently in my mouth, shake it a bit, and then spit it out. It lies motionless on the ground. I nudge it with my paw, and when it jumps, I pin it down again. Finally, tired of this game, I eat it. A word of advice to those who have never eaten a praying mantis: they aren't very tasty, and they're not particularly nutritious. After mantis hunting, I move on to cicada catching. Not all cicadas are created equal. Just as there are different kinds of humans, there are different kinds of cicadas: abarazimi, minminzemi, and tsuku-tsukuboshi. Abarazimi are too greasy. Minminzemi are too unpredictable. Tsuku-tsukuboshi are the most fun to catch. They don't appear until late summer. When the autumn breeze starts to blow, signaling the end of summer, they chirp incessantly, as if they've caught a cold. They chirp so much that I suspect their only purpose in life is to be caught by cats. I catch them in early autumn. This is what I call cicada catching exercise. I have a question for you learned humans. Do they chirp tsuku-tsukuboshi or boshitsuku-tsuku? The interpretation has significant implications for cicada research. Humans pride themselves on their intellectual superiority to cats, so if you don't know the answer now, you should look into it. Of course, it makes no difference to my cicada catching exercise. I simply follow the sound, climb the tree, and pounce on them while they're engrossed in their chirping. This might seem like a simple exercise, but it's quite strenuous. I have 4 legs, so I'm quite agile on the ground. I can certainly outrun any human, at least mathematically speaking. But when it comes to climbing trees, there are creatures far more adept than I. Monkeys, of course, are in a league of their own, but even humans, their descendants, can be surprisingly skilled. Climbing trees goes against gravity, so I don't consider it a failure if I can't do it well. But it does pose a challenge for my cicada catching exercise. Thankfully, I have claws, so I can manage, but it's not as easy as it looks. And cicadas, unlike praying mantises, can fly. If they fly away, all that effort climbing the tree is wasted. And finally, there's the risk of being peed on. Sometimes it feels like they aim for my eyes. I have to dodge, of course. Why do they pee just as they're about to fly away? Is it out of fear? Or is it a tactic to distract the enemy and create an opportunity to escape? If so, it belongs in the same category as a squid releasing ink, a sea cucumber expelling its guts, or my master spouting Latin. This is another important question for cicada research. A thorough investigation could easily be the basis for a doctoral dissertation. But I digress. Back to the main topic. Cicadas tend to congregate, or perhaps assemble is a better word, although it sounds rather dull, so I'll stick with congregate, in Paulownia trees. These trees have large, fan-shaped leaves, and when they're in full bloom, the branches are completely hidden. This poses a significant challenge for my cicada catching exercise. I hear the sound, but I cannot see the form, as the old saying goes. It's as if the proverb was written specifically for me. I follow the sound, climbing the tree. About a meter up, The Paulownia tree branches into a fork, providing a convenient resting spot. I pause there and scan the underside of the leaves, trying to locate the cicada. Often, startled by my approach, they fly away before I even reach the fork. Cicadas are as foolish as humans in their tendency to imitate. When one flies away, the others follow suit. By the time I reach the fork, the tree is often completely silent. Once, after climbing all the way up and finding no cicadas, I decided to rest and wait for another opportunity. I must have dozed off, because I suddenly found myself falling from the fork onto the stepping stones below. But usually, I manage to catch at least one every time I climb a tree. The only downside is that I have to carry it in my mouth while I climb down. By the time I reach the ground, it's usually dead. No amount of shaking or scratching elicits a response. The real thrill of cicada catching is the moment of capture, when you stealthily approach a chirping cicada, its abdomen rhythmically expanding and contracting, and suddenly pounce. The cicada cries out and frantically beats its delicate, translucent wings. It's a beautiful and mesmerizing sight, a true marvel of the cicada world. Every time I catch a cicada, I make it perform this artistic display before I finally, with your permission, pop it into my mouth. Some even continue their performance inside my mouth after cicada catching. I move on to pine sliding. This one requires little explanation. Pine sliding might sound like sliding down a pine tree, but it's actually another form of tree climbing. The difference is that cicada catching is about catching cicadas, while pine sliding is about the act of climbing itself. Pine trees, as you know, have rough bark. Ever since they were served as a delicacy at Saimyoji Temple, they've been particularly gnarled. Therefore, nothing is less slippery than a pine tree trunk. There are no convenient handholds or footholds, or rather, clawholds. The challenge is to climb the rough trunk quickly and efficiently, and then climb back down. There are two ways to climb down. One is to descend head first, like Yoshitsune at Hyodorigo. The other is to descend tail first, maintaining the same posture as when climbing up. Which is more difficult, you ask? Humans, in their naivete, might assume that descending head first is easier. But they would be wrong. You probably think that since even Yoshitsune descended head first, a cat should certainly be able to do the same. Don't underestimate us. Which way do you think a cat's claws curve? They curve backwards. They're designed for pulling, not pushing. Imagine I've just climbed a pine tree. Being a creature of the earth, gravity naturally wants to pull me down. If I let go, I would fall. But falling freely would be too quick. I need to control my descent. This is what climbing down means. Falling and climbing down might seem like very different things, but the difference is subtle. Slowing down a fall makes it a descent, and speeding up a descent makes it a fall. It's a matter of degree. I don't want to fall from the tree, so I have to slow down my descent. I have to resist gravity. As I mentioned, my claws curve backwards, so if I climb down head first, my claws can effectively resist gravity. Thus, falling becomes descending. It's simple logic. But try climbing down tail first, like Yoshitsune. Your claws are useless. You'll just slide down. Descending becomes falling. Hyodorigo is difficult. I'm probably the only cat who can do it. That's why I call it pine sliding. Finally, a word about fence walking. My master's garden is surrounded by a bamboo fence. The side parallel to the veranda is about 8 or 9 ken long. The other two sides are only 4 ken each. Fence walking involves walking along the top of this fence without falling. It's not always successful, but when it is, it's quite satisfying. There are charred logs placed at intervals along the fence, providing convenient resting spots. I was feeling particularly agile today, so I walked the fence 3 times before noon. I improved with each attempt, and the more I improved, the more enjoyable it became. I was about to attempt a 4th circuit when 3 crows flew over from the neighbor's roof and landed on the fence a few feet ahead of me. How dare they obstruct my exercise? And what right did these vagrant crows have to perch on our fence? Get out of my way, I shouted. The first crow just smirked at me. The second one looked around the garden. The third one wiped its beak on the bamboo fence. It had probably just eaten something. I waited for a response, giving them 3 minutes. I stood my ground on the fence. Crows are also known as kanzaman. And this kanzaman was living up to its reputation. It didn't move or even acknowledge me. I started walking again. The first kanzaman spread its wings slightly. I thought it was finally going to fly away, intimidated by my presence, but it just shifted its position. That scoundrel. If I were on the ground, I would have taught it a lesson, but I didn't have the luxury of dealing with crows on this precarious path. But I couldn't just stand there and wait for them to leave. My legs were getting tired. This was my 4th circuit, and I was already exhausted. Fence walking is as challenging as tightrope walking. Even without obstacles, it's not easy. And these black-clad creatures were blocking my way. If I pushed forward, I risked falling. Should I just retreat and climb down? They had the advantage of numbers, and they were unfamiliar. Their beaks were sharp and pointed, like the offspring of a tengu. They were clearly up to no good. Retreating would be the safer option. If I fell, it would be even more humiliating. Just as I was considering this, the crow that had turned its head to the left said, "Idiot." The next one mimicked it, "Idiot." The third one, even more politely, said, "Idiot, idiot." Even a mild-mannered cat like myself couldn't ignore this insult. Being insulted by crows in my own territory was an affront to my dignity. Or rather, my pride, since I don't have a name. Retreat was impossible. As the proverb says, even crows gather in numbers, so perhaps 3 crows weren't so formidable. I steeled my nerves and continued walking. The crows ignored me, seemingly engrossed in their own conversation. This was infuriating. If only the fence were a bit wider, I would have taught them a lesson. But unfortunately, I could only advance slowly. I finally reached the first crow, about 5 or 6 inches away. Just as I was about to pass it, the kanzaman suddenly flapped its wings and flew a foot or 2 into the air. The gust of wind startled me, and I lost my balance and fell. Blast it, I thought, looking up from the ground. The 3 crows were back in their original positions, looking down at me, their beaks pointed downwards. The audacity. I glared at them, but it had no effect. I arched my back and hissed, but it was useless. Just as Philistines don't understand symbolic poetry, these crows didn't understand my display of anger. I had been treating them as if they were cats. That was my mistake. If they were cats, they would have understood. But they were crows. Stubborn kanzaman crows. A businessman trying to outsmart my master, Kushami. Offering a silver cat to Saigyo. A crow defecating on the statue of Takamori Saigo. Realizing that I was outmatched, I retreated to the veranda. It was almost dinner time. Exercise is good, but too much is detrimental. My body felt weak and wobbly, and my fur, heated by the afternoon sun during my exercise, was uncomfortably hot. Sweat trickled down my skin, clinging to the roots of my fur like oil. My back itched. I could distinguish between the itch of sweat and the itch of fleas. I could bite the fleas I could reach, and scratch the itches within reach of my paws, but the middle of my back was inaccessible. In such situations, I usually rub against a human or scratch my back against the rough bark of a pine tree. Humans are foolish creatures. If you approach them with a purr is the sound a human makes when addressing a cat. From a cat's perspective, it's a being petted sound. They often mistake it for affection and not only let you rub against them but also pet you. But lately, a certain type of parasite known as a flea has infested my fur, so if I rub against a human, they usually grab me by the scruff of my neck and throw me away. They've turned against me because of a few insignificant insects. 1 minute they're showering you with affection, the next they're throwing you out. Such fickleness. These fleas are so small and insignificant, yet they have such power over human behavior. Since humans are no longer an option, I have no choice but to resort to the pine tree method. But then I realized that this too was a bad idea. Pine trees have resin. And pine resin is incredibly sticky. If it gets on your fur, it'll never come off, not even if lightning strikes or the Baltic fleet is annihilated. It starts with 5 hairs, then spreads to 10, then 30. I'm a cat of simple tastes. I detest anything sticky, gooey, or persistent. Even the most beautiful cat would be ruined by pine resin. I wouldn't want to defile my elegant grey fur with that sticky mess. I knew what would happen if I went to the pine tree. The resin would immediately cling to my fur. I couldn't risk ruining my beautiful coat for a simple itch. No matter how much my back itched, I had to endure it. But if both options were unavailable, I would have to find another solution. I racked my brains, and then I remembered something. My master sometimes leaves the house with a towel and soap, returning 30 or 40 minutes later with a slightly less gloomy expression. If it has such an effect on a dullard like him, it must be even more beneficial for me. I'm already quite handsome, so I don't need to improve my looks, but I wouldn't want to die prematurely at the age of 1 from some illness caused by itching and sticky resin. I've heard that this human invention is called a bathhouse. It's probably useless, but it's worth a try. If it doesn't work, I can always stop. But would humans allow a cat into their exclusive bathhouse? That was the question. My master acts as if he owns the place, so he probably wouldn't object to my presence, but I didn't want to risk embarrassment. I decided to scout the location first. If it seemed promising, I would bring a towel and jump in. With that plan in mind, I set off for the bathhouse. Turning left at the corner, I saw a tall, bamboo-like structure with smoke rising from its chimney. This was the bathhouse. I stealthily approached the back entrance. Some might call this cowardly or underhanded, but those are the words of those who are forced to use the front entrance. Clever people always use the back entrance. It even says so in the second volume, first chapter, page 5 of How to Be a Gentleman. The next page apparently reads, "The back entrance is a gentleman's testament and the gateway to self-improvement." As a 20th century cat, I'm well educated. Don't underestimate me. I slipped inside. To my left, a mountain of firewood, split pine logs about 8 inches long, was piled high. Next to it, a hill of coal. Why a mountain of firewood and a hill of coal? No reason, just a stylistic choice. It's a shame that humans, after exhausting all other culinary possibilities, have resorted to eating coal. A 3-foot-wide entrance was open. Peeking inside, I saw a dark and quiet space. Human voices could be heard from the other side. The bath must be over there, I concluded. I made my way through the valley between the firewood and the coal, turned left, and saw a glass window. Outside the window, round buckets were stacked in a pyramid shape. I sympathized with the buckets, forced into such an unnatural triangular arrangement. On the other side of the buckets, a 4 or 5 foot wide ledge beckoned me. It was about a meter above the ground, the perfect height for jumping. Excellent, I thought, and leaped onto the ledge. The bath was right in front of me. There is no greater pleasure than experiencing something new, seeing something you've never seen before. If you're like my master, visiting the bathhouse 3 times a week for 30 or 40 minutes, it might not be so exciting. But if you've never seen a bathhouse before, like me, you should definitely take a look. It's a spectacle unlike any other. What spectacle? You ask. It's a spectacle so extraordinary, I hesitate to describe it. Inside the glass window, a crowd of humans was milling about, all completely naked. Savages of Taiwan. Adams of the 20th century. If you were to trace the history of clothing, a tedious task I'll leave to Mr. Teufelsdrache, you would realize that humans are defined by their clothing. In the 18th century, Beau Nash established strict rules at the bath spa in England, requiring both men and women to cover themselves from shoulders to ankles with garments even in the bathhouse. 60 years ago, a design school was established in a certain English city. Being a design school, they naturally acquired nude paintings and sculptures for their students to copy, displaying them prominently throughout the building. However, when the time came for the opening ceremony, the school officials encountered a serious problem. They had to invite the city's prominent ladies to the ceremony. But these ladies believed that humans were clothed animals, not skin-clad apes. They considered nudity to be a loss of humanity, reducing people to the level of beasts. Attending an event where they would have to mingle with naked, beastly humans, even if they were just models, would be beneath their dignity. They refused to attend. The school officials, realizing they couldn't hold the ceremony without the ladies, who served as essential decorations, had no choice but to buy 35 bolts of black cloth and dress the naked models from head to toe. They even covered their faces, just to be safe. That's how important clothing is to humans. These days, some artists advocate for nudity, but they're mistaken. As a cat who has never been naked a single day in my life, I can tell you that they're wrong. Nudity became fashionable during the Renaissance, influenced by the licentiousness of the time and the legacy of Greece and Rome. The Greeks and Romans were accustomed to nudity, so they probably didn't see it as morally problematic. But Northern Europe is cold. Even in Japan, walking around naked would be unthinkable. In Germany or England, you would freeze to death. And no one wants to freeze to death, so they wear clothes. When everyone wears clothes, humans become clothed animals. And when clothed animals encounter naked animals, they don't see humans, they see beasts. Therefore, Europeans, especially Northern Europeans, are justified in considering nude paintings and sculptures to be depictions of beasts. Beasts inferior to cats. Beautiful? Fine, call them beautiful beasts. You might argue that Western women wear revealing evening gowns. But being a cat, I've never seen a Western woman's evening gown. I've heard they expose their chests, shoulders, and arms, and call it formal wear. How absurd. Until the 14th century, their attire was not so ridiculous. They wore normal clothes. Why they transitioned to this vulgar, exhibitionist style is a tedious topic I won't go into. Those who know, know. Those who don't can remain blissfully ignorant. Anyway, they wear these strange outfits at night, seemingly enjoying themselves. But they must feel some shame, because during the day, they cover their shoulders, chests, and arms, and consider it immodest to show even a single toenail. This shows that their evening gowns are a product of absurdity, a result of foolish consensus. If they're so proud of their nudity, they should walk around naked during the day. The same goes for nudity enthusiasts. If nudity is so great, they should walk around Ueno Park naked with their daughters. Can't do it. It's not that they can't. It's that Westerners don't do it, so they don't either. They wear those illogical evening gowns to the Imperial Hotel, don't they? Why? No reason, just because Westerners do it. Westerners are powerful, so even if their customs are foolish, the Japanese feel compelled to imitate them. Bow to the strong, yield to the mighty, submit to the heavy. What a spineless philosophy. Don't overestimate the Japanese. The same applies to academics, but that's irrelevant to clothing, so I'll omit it as I've demonstrated. Clothing is crucial to humans. It's almost as if clothes make the man, or rather, the human. Human history isn't a history of flesh, bone, or blood, but a history of clothing. So, seeing naked humans feels unnatural. It's like encountering monsters. If everyone were naked, the concept of monster would disappear, but that would be inconvenient for humans. Long ago, nature created humans as equals. Everyone is born naked. If human nature truly valued equality, they would remain naked throughout their lives. But one naked person thought, it's pointless to work hard if everyone is the same. My efforts will go unnoticed. I need to stand out. I need something that will make people say, that's him. I need something shocking. After 10 years of contemplation, he invented the loincloth. He put it on and strutted around, saying, "How do you like that?" He was the ancestor of the modern rickshaw puller. It seems strange that it took 10 years to invent something as simple as a loincloth, but that's judging from a modern perspective. Back then, it was a groundbreaking invention. Descartes supposedly spent more than 10 years coming up with the simple truth, I think, therefore I am. Coming up with new ideas is hard work, so 10 years for a loincloth is quite an achievement for a rickshaw puller's intellect. With the invention of the loincloth, rickshaw pullers ruled the streets. Another, more ambitious, person, envious of the rickshaw puller's dominance, spent 6 years inventing the hari jacket. The loincloth's popularity declined, and the hari became the fashion of the day. Greengrocers, pharmacists, and kimono merchants are all descendants of this great inventor. After the loincloth era and the hari era came the hakama era. This was the invention of another person, who thought, hari? How about something even better? Samurai and government officials are all descendants of this inventor. These inventors, competing with each other, eventually came up with the ridiculous swallowtail coat. But these inventions weren't arbitrary or accidental. They were the product of ambition, the desire to stand out. They wore these clothes to declare, "I'm not like you." This reveals a fundamental truth about human nature. Just as nature abhors a vacuum, humans abhor equality. Having become accustomed to using clothing to distinguish themselves, returning to a state of naked equality would be madness. Even if they accepted the label of madmen, they couldn't go back. Those who did would be seen as monsters by the enlightened masses. Even if everyone in the world were naked, the competition would simply continue in a different form. Naked people would find other ways to differentiate themselves. Therefore, clothing has become an indispensable part of human existence, and yet, the group of humans I was observing had discarded their loincloths, Hari, and Hakama, shamelessly displaying their natural state for all to see, chatting and laughing as if it were the most normal thing in the world. This was the spectacle I was referring to. I will now describe this scene for the benefit of you civilized readers. It's a chaotic scene, difficult to describe in an orderly fashion. Monsters have no sense of order. Let's start with the bathtub. I assume it's a bathtub, although I've never seen one before. It's about 3 feet wide and perhaps a ken and a half long, divided into 2 sections. One section contains white, murky water, apparently a medicinal bath containing dissolved lime. It's not just murky, it's greasy and thick. It wouldn't be surprising if it were rotten, considering they only change the water once a week. The other section contains ordinary hot water, although it's far from clear and sparkling. It looks like a stirred-up rainwater barrel. Now for the monsters. This will be difficult. 2 young men are standing in the ordinary hot water, facing each other, splashing water on their stomachs. How amusing. Both are remarkably dark-skinned. Quite robust specimens, I thought, when one of them, rubbing his chest with a towel, said, "Kan-san, my chest hurts, what do you think it is?" Kan-san replied, "It's your stomach. Stomach problems can be fatal, you should be careful." "But it's on my left side," the man said, pointing to his left lung. "That's your stomach. Left is stomach, right is lung." "Really? I thought my stomach was around here," the man said, tapping his waist. "That's your hernia," Kan-san replied. Just then, a man with a thin mustache, about 25 or 26 years old, jumped into the bath. Soap and grime floated to the surface, shimmering like iron filings in water. Next to him, a bald old man with a 5-point haircut was lecturing someone. Only their heads were visible above the water. "It's no good getting old. We can't compete with the youngsters. But I can't stand lukewarm baths. You're still quite robust, sir. It's good to be so energetic." "I'm not energetic, I'm just not sick. If you don't do anything bad, you can live to be 120. "Really? That long?" "I guarantee it. Before the restoration, there was a Hatamoto named Magaribachi in Ushigome, and his servant lived to be 130. That's incredible. He lived so long that he forgot his own age. He remembered up to 100, but after that, he lost track. He was 130 when I last saw him, but he didn't die then. I don't know what happened after that. He might still be alive." He climbed out of the bath. The mustached man, surrounded by shimmering soap bubbles, chuckled to himself. The next person to jump in had a tattoo on his back, an unfinished image of Iwami Jutaro battling a serpent. Since the tattoo wasn't complete, the serpent was missing, which made Jutaro look rather foolish. "It's lukewarm," he complained. Another man climbed in and said, "It's too hot." He seemed to be trying to endure the heat. He saw Jutaro and said, "Hey, boss." "Hey," Jutaro replied, then asked, "What happened to Tammy? He likes gambling too much." "Not just gambling, really? He's not a bad guy. He's not well liked, people don't trust him. A craftsman shouldn't be like that." "That's true. Tammy is too humble, his head is too high. That's why people don't trust him." "Exactly. He thinks he's so skilled, but he's only hurting himself." The old master in Shiragencho passed away. Now it's just Moto-san the cooper and the bricklayer boss who are considered masters. "We were both born here, but no one knows where Tammy came from." "That's true. But he's done well for himself. Yes, but he's not well liked. No one wants to associate with him. They continued their criticism of Tammy leaving the ordinary bath. I looked at the medicinal bath. It was so crowded that it looked more like people in hot water than hot water with people in it. And no one was getting out. The water must be filthy, I thought, looking closely. In the corner, I saw my master, squeezed in, his face bright red. Someone should make room for him, I thought, but no one moved. My master just stood there, turning redder and redder. He was probably trying to get his money's worth from the 2.5 sen bath fee. He'll faint from the steam, I worried, watching him from the window ledge. The man floating next to him said, "It's a bit too strong today. I feel a burning sensation on my back. This is the perfect temperature. Medicinal baths need to be hot. In my country, they're twice as hot," another man boasted. "What does this bath cure, anyway?" a man with a bumpy head asked, hiding his face with a towel. "Everything. If it's good for one thing, it's good for everything," a skinny, cucumber-shaped man declared. "If it cured everything, they should all be healthier. It's best on the 3rd or 4th day after they add the medicine. Today is the perfect day," another man said knowledgeably. He was probably covered in grime, trying to absorb the medicinal properties through his skin. "Can you drink it?" a squeaky voice asked. "If you drink a cup after it cools down, you won't have to get up to urinate during the night. Try it sometime," a voice replied, its source unclear. Leaving the bathtubs, I looked around the changing room. Naked Adams everywhere, in various poses, washing themselves. The most amusing were a man lying on his back, staring at the skylight, and another lying on his stomach, peering into the drain. They must have had plenty of free time. A monk was squatting, facing the wall, while a young acolyte massaged his shoulders. The acolyte was probably filling in for the monk's attendant. There was a real attendant, too. He seemed to have a cold, wearing an undershirt despite the heat, pouring water over a man's shoulders from a small, oval bucket. He had a loofah tucked between his toes. A man was hoarding 3 buckets, urging his neighbor to use soap, while engaged in a lengthy conversation. I listened in. Guns were imported from foreign lands. In the old days, it was all sword fights. Foreigners are cowardly, that's why they invented guns. It doesn't seem like something the Chinese would do, it must be from further west. They didn't have guns during the War of the Three Kingdoms. The War of the Three Kingdoms was fought by the Seiwa Genji. When Yoshitsune fled to Izo, a learned Izo man followed him. And Yoshitsune's son attacked the Ming dynasty. The Ming emperor, in desperation, sent an envoy to the 3rd shogun, asking to borrow 3,000 soldiers. The shogun kept the envoy hostage. What was his name? Some kind of envoy. He kept him for 2 years and then showed him a prostitute in Nagasaki. The child of that union was the founder of the War of the Three Kingdoms. When he returned home, he found that the Ming dynasty had been overthrown by traitors. It made no sense. Behind him, a gloomy-looking man in his 20s was rinsing his groin with hot water. He seemed to have some kind of ailment. Next to him, a young man of 17 or 18 was chattering away about trivial matters. He must have been a student from a nearby boarding house. Then I saw a peculiar back. The spine was so prominent, it looked like bamboo shoots were growing out of it. And on either side of the spine, 4 perfectly aligned welts, some of them red and festering. There were so many strange sights, it was impossible to describe them all. I was starting to feel overwhelmed when an old monk, about 70 years old, wearing a pale yellow cotton robe, appeared at the entrance. He bowed respectfully to the naked crowd and said, "Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your patronage. It's a bit chilly today, so please take your time and warm yourselves in the bath. Banto, make sure the water temperature is just right." "All right," a voice replied. The man who had been talking about the War of the Three Kingdoms said, "What a charmer. You need to be charming to succeed in business." He seemed to be impressed by the old monk. I was so startled by the monk's appearance that I forgot all about the other naked humans, even my poor, red-faced master, and focused my attention on the monk. He saw a 4-year-old boy and said, "Young master, come here." The boy, startled by the monk's appearance, burst into tears. The monk, slightly disappointed, said, "Are you crying? Are you scared of me?" Oh dear, oh dear. He quickly changed tack and addressed the boy's father. Gen-san, it's a bit chilly today, isn't it? That burglar who broke into Omiya last night was a fool. He cut a square hole in the door and then left without taking anything. He must have been scared off by the police or the night watchman. He chuckled at the burglar's incompetence, then turned to another man. It's cold, isn't it? You young people don't feel the cold as much as us old folks. He was the only one complaining about the cold that I was so engrossed in observing the old monk that I forgot all about the other naked humans, even my poor master, still stewing in the hot water. Suddenly, a loud voice erupted from between the washing area and the changing room. It was my master. His voice was always loud and unpleasant, but in this setting, it was particularly startling. I immediately concluded that he had been driven mad by the prolonged immersion in the hot water. If it were simply a matter of discomfort, it would be excusable, but his outburst revealed a deeper issue. He started arguing with the impertinent young student. Move over. You're splashing water in my bucket, he yelled. One could interpret this outburst as a righteous indignation, like Tokoyama Hikokuro rebuking a bandit. Perhaps that's how my master saw himself, but the student wasn't a bandit. He simply replied, I was here first. It was a reasonable response, but my master wasn't appeased. He wasn't just angry about the splashing, he was annoyed by the student's arrogance and condescending remarks. You idiot. Don't splash dirty water in my bucket, he shouted. I, too, had found the student annoying, so I felt a certain satisfaction at my master's outburst. But it was unbecoming of a teacher. My master was too rigid, like a piece of burnt coal, dry, brittle, and hard. Hannibal, crossing the Alps, encountered a large boulder blocking his path. He poured vinegar on the boulder, lit a fire, softened the rock, and then cut it in half with a saw. My master, despite being boiled in this medicinal bath, remained unchanged. He needed to be softened with vinegar and fire. Otherwise, he would never learn to deal with impertinent students. The people stewing in the bath, the people lounging in the changing room, these were monsters who had shed the trappings of civilization. They could do as they pleased. They could have their stomachs on the wrong side, believe in absurd historical narratives, and distrust anyone they chose. But once they stepped out of the bathhouse, they were no longer monsters. They were returning to the civilized world, putting on their clothes, and resuming their human roles. My master was standing on the threshold, the boundary between the bathhouse and the outside world, about to re-enter the world of social decorum. And yet, he was still behaving like a monster. This rigidity was a disease. And there was only one cure: he needed to be fired. If he lost his job, he would surely end up on the streets, destitute and alone. In other words, losing his job would be a slow death sentence. My master enjoyed being sick, but he hated the idea of dying. He wanted the luxury of illness without the risk of death. So, if someone threatened to kill him, he would surely be terrified. And in his terror, his rigidity would melt away. If not, so be it. No matter how foolish or sick he was still my master. Even cats care about their masters. Concerned for his well-being, I had been so distracted that I had neglected to observe the bathhouse. Suddenly, a chorus of angry voices erupted from the white bath. Another fight. I turned and saw a chaotic mass of naked bodies, hairy legs and bare groins entangled, struggling in the narrow entrance. The early autumn sun was setting, and the bathhouse was filled with steam. The writhing mass of bodies was barely visible through the haze. Hot! Hot! They cried, their voices echoing through the bathhouse, yellow voices, blue voices, red voices, black voices, merging into a cacophony of confusion and distress. I stood frozen, mesmerized by the spectacle. Just as the chaos reached its peak, a large man emerged from the writhing mass. He was at least 3 inches taller than the others, his red face barely visible beneath a thick beard. He threw back his head and roared, "It's burning! It's burning!" His voice and his face rose above the chaotic crowd, and for a moment, he seemed to fill the entire bathhouse. A Superman. Natsume Sōseki. The king of the demons. The leader of the monsters. Amazing, I thought. Then a voice from behind the bathtub replied, "All right." I turned and saw Sōseki, the bathhouse attendant still in his undershirt, tossing a lump of coal into the furnace. The coal crackled, illuminating Sōseki's face and the brick wall behind him. I was starting to feel uneasy, so I jumped down from the window ledge and hurried home. Even in a crowd of naked equals, a powerful individual will always emerge and dominate the others. Equality cannot be achieved through nudity. When I got home, all was peaceful. My master, his face gleaming from his bath, was eating dinner. Seeing me climb onto the veranda, he said, "Lazy cat, where have you been?" He had 2 or 3 dishes on his tray, despite his lack of money. There was a grilled fish, probably caught near Odaiba yesterday. I had said that fish were healthy, but even healthy fish couldn't survive being boiled or grilled. It's better to be sickly and alive than healthy and dead. I sat beside the tray, pretending to be indifferent, but watching for an opportunity to steal a bite. If you don't know how to do this, you'll never get any tasty morsels. My master poked at the fish with his chopsticks, made a face, and put them down. My mistress, sitting opposite him, was silently eating, studying his every move. "Hey, swat that cat's head," my master suddenly said. "Why? Just do it. Like this." She lightly tapped my head with her hand. "It didn't hurt, it didn't meow." "No. Do it again." "It won't make a difference," she said, and swatted my head again. I didn't react. I still didn't understand his purpose. If I knew, I could cooperate, but he just kept telling her to swat me. It was annoying for both of us. My master, growing impatient, said, "Make it meow." "Why?" she asked, annoyed. She swatted me again. If he had explained his purpose, it would have been much simpler. I could have meowed and satisfied his curiosity without being swatted repeatedly. He was such a fool. The command swat should only be used when the act of swatting itself is the objective. Swatting is her action, meowing is mine. Assuming that a swat would automatically elicit a meow was presumptuous. It was a violation of my autonomy. He was treating me like an object. It was the kind of thing Kaneda, whom my master despised, would do, not a man who prided himself on his intellectual superiority. But my master wasn't usually so mean-spirited. He was simply not very bright. He probably assumed that just as eating leads to a full stomach, cutting leads to bleeding, and killing leads to death, swatting would lead to meowing. Unfortunately, his logic was flawed. By that logic, falling into a river would always lead to drowning, eating tempura would always lead to diarrhea, receiving a salary would always lead to showing up for work, and reading books would always lead to enlightenment. But that's not always the case. If I had to meow every time I was swatted, I would be constantly meowing. I would be like the clock of Mahiro, chiming constantly. I mentally scolded my master, then, complying with his request, I meowed. "Is that meow an interjection or an adverb?" he asked my mistress. She didn't reply, startled by the sudden question. Even I thought he was still delirious from the bath. My master was a well-known eccentric. Some even called him crazy. But he insisted that he wasn't crazy, everyone else was. When people called him a dog, he called them pigs, insisting on fairness. He was obsessed with fairness. That's why he would ask such a strange question. My mistress, looking bewildered, remained silent. I, of course, couldn't answer. "Hey," my master shouted. "Yes," my mistress replied, startled. "Is that yes an interjection or an adverb? Which is it? Why does it matter?" It matters. It's a major debate among linguists. You mean a cat's meow? How absurd. A cat's meow isn't even Japanese. That's the point. That's what makes it a difficult question. It's about comparative linguistics. Oh, my mistress, wisely, refused to engage with his nonsense. "So, have you figured it out?" "It's a complex issue, it takes time," he said, and continued eating his fish. He then ate a piece of pork and potato stew. "This is pork, right?" "Yes, it's pork." "Mph," he said disdainfully, swallowing it. "I'll have another cup of sake." "You're drinking a lot tonight. You're quite red already." "I'll drink as much as I like." "Do you know the longest word in the world?" "The former Lord Chancellor and Prime Minister." "That's a title, not a word." "Do you know the longest word?" "A foreign word." "Yes." "I don't." "You should stop drinking now and eat your dinner." "No, I'll have another cup." Shall I tell you the longest word? Fine, but then you must eat your dinner. It's archaea melisi dona fruniscerata. That's nonsense. It's not nonsense, it's Greek. What does it mean? I don't know. I only know how to spell it. It's about 6 inches long when written out. He was saying things that most people would only say when drunk, but he was perfectly sober. He had already had 4 cups of sake, twice his usual amount. His face was as red as a hot poker. And yet, he poured himself another cup. His wife, exasperated, said, "That's enough. It's bad for you." "I don't care, I'm practicing. Keigetsu Omachi told me to drink." Who's Keigetsu? Even Keigetsu was unknown to my mistress, he's a leading critic. If he tells me to drink, it must be a good thing. Don't be ridiculous. Keigetsu, or whoever he is, wouldn't tell a married man with a family to drink himself silly. He didn't just tell me to drink. He told me to socialize, enjoy myself, and travel. That's even worse. A leading critic telling people to be irresponsible. It's not so bad. I might do those things even if he didn't tell me to, if I had the money. It's a good thing you don't. If you started now, we'd be in trouble. If you're so worried, I'll refrain. But then you must treat me better and cook me better meals. This is the best I can do. I see. Then I'll postpone my debauchery until I have more money. I'll stop for now. He poured himself a bowl of rice and ate 3 bowls of chazook. I had 3 pieces of pork and the head of the grilled fish that night. Chapter 8. When I described my fence-walking exercise, I briefly mentioned the bamboo fence surrounding my master's garden. You might think that our next-door neighbor, Jiro, lives right on the other side of this fence, but you'd be mistaken. My master, Kushami, despite his low rent, wouldn't be caught dead socializing with commoners like Jiro. Beyond the fence lies a vacant lot, about 5 or 6 ken wide, with 5 or 6 hinoki cypress trees growing in the center. From the veranda, it looks like a dense forest, giving the impression that my master is a reclusive scholar living in a secluded cottage in the woods, with only a nameless cat for company. However, the cypress trees aren't as dense as they appear, and the cheap roof of a shabby boarding house called the Gunkakukan is clearly visible through the gaps. This rather grand name belies its true nature, much like the Garyokutsu, reclining dragon grotto, the name my master gives to his humble abode. While he fancies himself a hermit living in a grotto with a wise, old cat, the reality is quite different. Names are free, so we can call ourselves whatever we like. This 5 or 6 ken wide vacant lot runs east to west along the bamboo fence for about 10 ken, then turns sharply, like a hook, and encloses the north side of the Garyokutsu. This north side is the source of all the trouble. It should be a vacant lot all the way around the house, but both my master and I struggle with this vacant lot. Just as hinoki trees dominate the south side, 7 or 8 paulownia trees stand in a row on the north side. They're about a foot in circumference, so they would be worth a good price if we could find a clogmaker. But alas, being renters, we can't do anything about them. I feel sorry for my master. The other day, a janitor from the school came and cut down a branch. The next time he came, he was wearing new paulownia clogs. "I made these from the branch I cut down the other day," he announced proudly. What a scoundrel. We have paulownia trees, but they're useless to us. Possessing a jewel is a crime, as the old saying goes. We have a treasure, but it's worthless to us. The fool isn't my master, or me, but the landlord, Denbei. He collects the rent without lifting a finger, while the paulownia trees practically beg to be made into clogs. I have no particular grudge against Denbei, so I'll stop complaining about him and get back to the story of how this vacant lot became the source of all the trouble. But don't tell my master, this is just between us. The main problem with the vacant lot is that it has no fence. It's open on all sides, a thoroughfare for all. Well, that's not entirely true. It used to have a fence. But to understand why it doesn't anymore, we need to go back in time. Even doctors need a proper history before they can prescribe medicine. So, let's start from the beginning, when we first moved in. An open lot is pleasant in the summer, a refreshing breeze blowing through. And there's no need for security when there's nothing worth stealing. My master's house requires no fences, walls, or barricades. However, This depends on the nature of the humans or animals inhabiting the surrounding area. To determine the necessity of a fence, we need to understand the character of our neighbors. Calling them gentlemen before we even know if they're human or animal might seem premature, but most people are gentlemen. Even burglars are called gentlemen of the rafters. But the gentlemen in this case weren't the kind to trouble the police. Instead, they troubled us with their sheer numbers. Hordes of them. They came from the Rakunkan, a private middle school where 800 gentlemen paid 2 yen a month to become even more gentlemanly. You might think that a school with such a refined name would produce only refined gentlemen, but you would be mistaken. Just as there are no cranes at the Gunkakukan and no dragons at the Garyokutsu, there are no guarantees about the students of the Rakunkan. Knowing that even scholars and teachers like my master can be eccentric, it's safe to assume that the Rakunkan students weren't all paragons of virtue. If you disagree, spend 3 days at my master's house and see for yourself. As I mentioned, when we first moved in, the vacant lot had no fence. The Rakunkan's gentlemen, like Kuro the rickshaw puller's cat, would wander into the Polonia Grove, chatting, eating lunch, napping on the bamboo grass, doing all sorts of things. They left behind the remnants of their lunches, bamboo sheaths, old newspapers, worn-out sandals and clogs, all sorts of rubbish. My master, indifferent, didn't complain. Perhaps he didn't notice, or perhaps he didn't care. But as the gentlemen received more education, they became bolder. They started encroaching on our territory, moving from the north side towards the south, like an army advancing slowly but surely. Encroaching might sound too aggressive for gentlemen, but I can't think of a better word. They abandoned the Polonia Grove and moved towards the hinoki trees on the south side, right in front of our living room. Only the boldest of gentlemen would dare to venture so close. A few days later, their boldness escalated. There's nothing more dangerous than education. They not only stood right in front of our living room, but they started singing. I don't remember the song, but it wasn't a refined 31-syllable poem. It was a lively, catchy tune. Even I was impressed, listening intently. But as you know, admiration and annoyance can coexist. Unfortunately, in this case, they became intertwined. My master, unable to bear it any longer, rushed out of his study and shouted, "This is private property. Get out." He chased them away several times. But being educated gentlemen, they wouldn't be deterred so easily. They came back as soon as he left, singing their lively songs, chatting loudly, using their gentlemanly language. You. I don't know you. Such language used to be the exclusive domain of rickshaw pullers, but now, in the 20th century, it had become the lingua franca of educated gentlemen. It's the same phenomenon as the rise of exercise. My master, exasperated, grabbed one of the loudest gentlemen and asked, "Why do you keep coming here?" The gentleman, forgetting his gentlemanly language, replied, "I thought this was the school's botanical garden." My master scolded him and let him go. He probably thought that would be the end of it. But just as women have been unpredictable since the dawn of time, my master was mistaken. The gentleman simply crossed the garden, exited through the front gate, and laughed in the Polonia Grove. The situation was getting out of hand. The effects of education were becoming increasingly apparent. My master, at his wit's end, shut himself in his study and wrote a letter to the principal of the Rakunkan, pleading for his intervention. The principal sent a polite reply, promising to build a fence. Soon, a few workmen arrived and built a 3-foot-high bamboo fence between our property and the Rakunkan. My master was delighted. Finally, some peace and quiet, he thought. He was a fool. A simple fence wouldn't deter the gentleman. Teasing people is entertaining. Even I, a cat, occasionally tease the young ladies of the house. So, it's understandable that the Rakunkan gentleman would tease the clueless Kushami. The only one who objects is the one being teased. There are 2 essential elements to teasing. First, the person being teased must react. Second, the teaser must be stronger than the target, both in terms of power and numbers. My master, returning from the zoo the other day, told a story that illustrates this perfectly. He had seen a camel and a small dog fighting. The dog ran around the camel, barking furiously, but the camel, unfazed, just stood there with its hump, ignoring the dog completely. Eventually, the dog gave up. Camels are so insensitive, my master laughed. It's the same with teasing. No matter how skilled the teaser, if the target is a camel, it won't work. But if the target is a lion or a tiger, it's too dangerous. You might get eaten alive. The ideal target is someone who gets angry but is powerless to retaliate. Teasing is enjoyable for several reasons. First, it's a good way to pass the time. When you're bored, you might even start counting your whiskers. A prisoner, languishing in his cell, supposedly passed the time drawing triangles on the wall. Boredom is unbearable. We need stimulation. Teasing provides that stimulation. Of course, the target must be annoyed, irritated, or weakened to provide the desired stimulation. Therefore, those who enjoy teasing are usually bored people with too much time on their hands, like feudal lords, or immature youngsters with undeveloped minds and excess energy. Teasing is also a way to demonstrate one's superiority. You can demonstrate your superiority by killing, injuring, or humiliating someone, but those are extreme measures. Teasing is a less harmful way to achieve the same result. You have to inflict some damage to prove your superiority. And it's not very satisfying to simply think you're superior. Humans are self-reliant creatures. Even when they're not, they want to be. So, they need to demonstrate their self-reliance to others. Those who are insecure or lack self-confidence will seize every opportunity to do this. It's like a jiu-jitsu practitioner who constantly wants to throw people. An insecure jiu-jitsu practitioner walks around hoping to encounter someone weaker than himself, even an amateur, so he can throw them and feel superior. There are other reasons, but I won't go into them now. If you're curious, bring me a box of dried bonito flakes, and I'll explain it to you. Based on the above, I believe that mountain monkeys and school teachers are the ideal targets for teasing. Comparing a school teacher to a mountain monkey is an insult to the monkey. But they're quite similar. Mountain monkeys are chained up, so they can bare their teeth and screech all they like, but they can't hurt you. School teachers aren't chained, but they're bound by their salaries. You can tease them all you want, they won't quit and attack their students. If they had the courage to do that, they wouldn't be teachers in the first place. My master is a teacher. Not a teacher at the Rakunkan, but a teacher nonetheless. He's the perfect target for teasing, safe, predictable, and harmless. The Rakunkan students are youngsters. Teasing is a way for them to assert their dominance, a right they believe they've earned through education. And they need an outlet for their excess energy. So, it's natural that they would tease my master. And it's foolish of him to get angry. I will now describe how the Rakunkan students teased my master, and how he, in his foolishness, reacted. You're probably familiar with bamboo fences. They're simple, well-ventilated structures. I can easily pass through the gaps. They're practically useless. But the principal of the Rakunkan didn't build the fence for cats. He built it to prevent his students from sneaking onto our property. And indeed, the 4-inch square holes are too small for humans to pass through. Not even a Chinese magician like Zhong Season could squeeze through them. So, as a fence for humans, it served its purpose. My master was delighted. This should solve the problem, he thought. But his logic was flawed. There was a bigger hole than the holes in the fence. A gaping hole in his reasoning. He assumed that the students, being students, wouldn't cross the fence, respecting the boundary it represented. And even if they did, the holes were too small to pass through. He concluded that there was no risk of intrusion. Indeed, as long as they weren't cats, they couldn't squeeze through the holes. But climbing over or jumping over the fence was easy. It was even good exercise. The day after the fence was built, the students returned to the vacant lot, just like before. But they didn't venture as close to the house. They stayed near the Paulownia trees, where they could easily escape if chased. My master, in his study on the east side of the house, couldn't see them. The only way to see them was to open the gate on the opposite side of the house, walk around the corner, and look into the vacant lot, or to look over the fence from the bathroom window. From the window, you could clearly see who was there, but you couldn't catch them. You could only yell at them. If you tried to sneak up on them from the gate, they would hear you coming and escape before you could reach them, like sea otters scattering when a poaching boat approaches. My master wasn't going to stand guard by the bathroom window all day. And he wasn't going to wait by the gate, ready to pounce. If he did that, he'd have to quit his job and become a full-time guard. His disadvantage was that he could hear the students from his study but couldn't see them, and he could see them from the window but couldn't reach them. The students, realizing this, devised a strategy. When they knew my master was in his study, they would make as much noise as possible, shouting and yelling, sometimes even taunting him. They would make it difficult to pinpoint the source of the noise, making it sound like they were sometimes inside the fence, sometimes outside. If my master came out, they would either run away or pretend they had been there all along, feigning innocence. And when they knew my master was in the bathroom, I apologize for using such vulgar language, but it's essential to the story, they would loiter near the Paulownia trees, making sure he saw them. If he yelled at them from the bathroom window, they would calmly retreat to their base. This strategy was incredibly effective. My master would hear the noise, convinced that they were intruding, grab his walking stick, and rush outside, only to find the vacant lot empty. Then he would look out the window and see them there, loitering near the trees. He would run to the back of the house, then to the bathroom, then back again, repeating this futile exercise endlessly. He was exhausted, driven to distraction. It was unclear whether he was a teacher or a soldier. And at the peak of his frustration, the incident occurred. Incidents usually occur at the peak of frustration. Frustration, as the name suggests, rises upwards. Even Galen, Paracelsus, and the ancient Bien Q would agree. The question is, what rises, and where does it rise to? According to ancient European legends, there are 4 humors circulating in the human body: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. When these humors are out of balance, it causes illness. An excess of yellow bile causes anger, an excess of phlegm causes sluggishness, an excess of black bile causes melancholy, and an excess of blood causes, well, an excess of blood. Over time, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile disappeared, and now only blood remains. So, if something rises, it must be blood. And when blood rushes to your head, it causes you to act irrationally. It's like when the police station burns down, and all the officers rush to the scene, leaving the streets unguarded. That's a case of police blood rush. To cure this, you need to redistribute the blood evenly throughout the body. There are several ways to do this. My master's late father supposedly applied a wet towel to his head and sat by the kotatsu. A cool head and warm feet are signs of good health and longevity, as the treatise on cold damage diseases says. A wet towel is essential for a long life. Or you could try the monk's method. Wandering monks always sleep under trees or on rocks. This isn't just for ascetic practice. It's a secret technique, developed by the 6th patriarch while pounding rice, to cool down the blood. Try sitting on a rock. Your backside will get cold. A cold backside leads to a cooler head. It's the natural order of things. Many methods have been devised to cool down the blood, but unfortunately, no one has figured out how to cause a blood rush. Generally speaking, a blood rush is undesirable, but there are exceptions. Some professions require a blood rush. Without it, they can't function. Poets, for example. A blood rush is as essential to a poet as coal is to a steamship. Without it, they become ordinary, unproductive people. Of course, blood rush is another name for madness, and it wouldn't be very respectable to admit to being mad, so they call it inspiration. It's a fancy word they invented to deceive the public. It's like calling kamaboko fish cake when it's made of mountain yam, or calling a statue of Kannon a sacred image when it's just a piece of wood, or calling duck nanban duck when it's actually crow, or calling gunabe beef stew when it's made of horse meat. Inspiration is just madness. Temporary madness. They don't need to be institutionalized because it's only temporary. But inducing this temporary madness is difficult. Lifelong madness is easy to achieve, but being mad only when writing is a challenge, even for the gods. And since the gods won't help, you have to do it yourself. Inducing a blood rush has been a challenge for scholars throughout history. One man ate 12 persimmons every day, believing that constipation would lead to inspiration. Another man jumped into a hot bath with a sake bottle, thinking that drinking sake in hot water would do the trick. He believed that if that didn't work, bathing in wine would surely induce the desired madness. Unfortunately, he died before he could try it. Another man tried imitating famous writers, believing that mimicking their behavior would induce a similar mental state. If you walk around with your sleeves rolled up like a drunkard, you'll eventually start to feel like a drunkard. If you sit in meditation for as long as it takes a stick of incense to burn, you'll eventually start to feel like a monk. So, if you imitate the behavior of famous writers who experienced inspiration, you'll surely be inspired yourself. Victor Hugo supposedly composed his works while lying on a yacht, so if you lie on a boat and look at the sky, you'll surely be inspired. Robert Louis Stevenson supposedly wrote while lying on his stomach, so if you lie on your stomach and hold a pen, the blood will surely rush to your head. Many people have tried many things, but no one has succeeded. As of today, artificially induced inspiration is impossible. It's unfortunate, but there's nothing we can do about it. I sincerely hope that the day will soon come when we can induce inspiration at will, for the benefit of humanity. Enough about inspiration, let's get back to the incident. But every major incident is preceded by minor incidents. Ignoring the minor incidents and focusing only on the major ones is a common mistake among historians. My master's madness escalated with each minor incident, culminating in the major incident. Therefore, to fully appreciate his madness, we need to examine its development. Otherwise, you might underestimate his madness, thinking it wasn't so bad. It's not satisfying to be mad if no one recognizes your madness. My master has no other redeeming qualities. If he can't even boast about his madness, there's nothing interesting about him. The incidents I'm about to describe are not flattering to my master. But since the incidents themselves are unflattering, I want to at least make it clear that his madness was genuine and impressive. The enemy forces at the Rakunkan had recently developed a new weapon, the Dum-Dum bullet. They fired these bullets into the vacant lot during their breaks and after school. These Dum-Dum bullets, commonly known as balls, were fired using a large, bat-like object called a baseball bat. These Dum-Dum bullets, fired from the Rakunkan's playing field, posed no threat to my master in his study. The enemy was well aware of the limited range of their weapons, but that was part of their strategy. During the siege of Port Arthur, the Japanese Navy used indirect fire to great effect. So, even balls landing harmlessly in the vacant lot could have a psychological impact. And indeed, every time they fired a ball, they would yell and scream, creating a terrifying cacophony. My master, startled, would experience vasoconstriction, the blood rushing to his head. The enemy's strategy was quite clever. Long ago, there was a Greek playwright named Aeschylus. He had the typical scholar-writer's head, bald. Scholars and writers use their brains a lot and are usually poor. Therefore, their heads are malnourished and bald. Aeschylus, being a writer, was naturally bald. One day, he was walking down the street, his shiny bald head gleaming in the sun. Tall trees attract the wind, and shiny heads attract, well, something. An eagle was circling overhead, carrying a tortoise in its talons. Tortoises are supposedly delicious, but they have hard shells. Even delicious food is useless if you can't eat it. They have grilled shrimp with shells, but no one eats tortoise shell stew, not even today. So, it certainly didn't exist back then. The eagle, struggling with the tortoise, saw a shiny object below. If I drop the tortoise on that shiny object, the shell will surely crack, it thought. It aimed carefully and dropped the tortoise. Unfortunately, the writer's head was softer than the tortoise shell. Aeschylus's skull was crushed, and he died a tragic death. I've always wondered whether the eagle knew it was a writer's head or if it mistook it for a rock. The answer would determine whether the Rakunkan students are comparable to the eagle. My master's head wasn't shiny and bald like Aeschylus's or other scholars. But as a scholar-writer who spent his days poring over difficult books in his six-mat study, his head was a potential target. So, it was only natural that the Rakunkan students would aim their Dum-Dum bullets at his head. If they continued their bombardment for 2 weeks, his head, stressed and malnourished, would surely start to resemble a kumquat, a kettle, or a copper pot. And after another 2 weeks, the kumquat would be crushed, the kettle would leak, and the copper pot would crack. Only Kushami, in his stubbornness, refused to acknowledge this and continued his futile resistance. One afternoon, I was taking my usual nap on the veranda, dreaming of being a tiger. I ordered my master to bring me some chicken. He obeyed, trembling with fear. Mighty arrived, and I ordered him to fetch me some roast goose. Roast goose with pickled turnips and salted rice crackers is a delightful combination, he said, trying to distract me. I roared at him, and he turned pale and said, "The roast goose shop has gone out of business. What shall I do?" "Fine, bring me a pound of beef from Nishikawa. Hurry, or I'll eat you," I growled. He ran off, his hakama tucked up around his knees. I had grown to an enormous size, filling the entire veranda. I was waiting for Mighty to return when a loud noise startled me awake. My master, whom I had been imagining bowing before me, suddenly kicked me in the side. He put on his jita and rushed out the gate, heading towards the Rakunkan. I had shrunk back to my normal size, feeling rather embarrassed and slightly sore. But the excitement of the chase and the pain in my side quickly made me forget about my tiger dream. He's finally going to confront them, I thought, and followed him to the back gate. "Thief!" I heard him yell. A sturdy-looking young man in a school cap was climbing over the fence. Just as my master reached him, the young man dropped his cap and ran back towards the Rakunkan. My master, triumphant, yelled "thief" again and chased after him. But to catch him, he would have to climb over the fence himself, crossing onto the enemy's territory. My master was a master of madness. He was so caught up in the chase that he didn't seem to care if he became a thief himself. He reached the fence. Just as he was about to cross it, a thin, mustached officer emerged from the enemy ranks. They began negotiating. "He's one of our students," the officer said. "Why did he trespass on my property?" My master demanded. He was retrieving a ball. "Why didn't he ask permission? We'll be more careful in the future." "Very well." The anticipated epic battle ended with a whimper. My master's fury had been all for show. He was like me, suddenly shrinking from a tiger back into a cat. This was the minor incident. And now, for the major incident. My master was lying on his stomach in the living room, staring at the sliding doors, deep in thought. He was probably devising a defense strategy. The Rakunkan was in session, and the playing field was quiet. I could hear an ethics lecture from one of the classrooms. The lecturer's voice was clear and resonant. It was the same officer who had negotiated with my master the day before. Public morality is essential. Whether in France, Germany, or England, all civilized nations value public morality. Even the most uncultured people understand its importance. Sadly, Japan still lags behind other countries in this regard. Some of you might think that public morality is a new concept imported from the West, but you would be mistaken. The ancients said, "The way is one, and it is achieved through compassion and consideration for others." Consideration for others is the foundation of public morality. I, too, enjoy singing at the top of my lungs. But if I hear someone singing loudly next door while I'm trying to study, I can't concentrate. Therefore, even when I want to recite Tang Dynasty poetry aloud, I refrain, because I don't want to disturb my neighbors. So, you too should be considerate of others and avoid doing anything that might disturb them. My master, listening to the lecture, smirked. I should explain the meaning of this smirk. A cynic might think he was being sarcastic. But my master wasn't malicious. He simply wasn't very bright. He was smirking because he was relieved. The ethics teacher's lecture assured him that the dum-dum bullet attacks would cease. He wouldn't go bald. His madness would subside. He wouldn't need a wet towel or a rock to cool down his blood. He believed the lecture wholeheartedly, like a man who believes that all debts are repaid. The lecture ended. Classes were dismissed. 800 students burst out of the building like a swarm of bees disturbed from their hive, buzzing and swarming, pouring out of windows, doors, and any available opening. This was the beginning of the major incident. Let me describe the students' formation. You might think that a formation is irrelevant in this kind of war, but you'd be mistaken. Most people think of war as something that happens in faraway places like Shaho, Mukden, or Port Arthur. More poetically inclined barbarians might imagine Achilles dragging Hector's corpse around the walls of Troy, or Yang Liang and Wen Chou wielding their serpent spears at the Battle of Changban Bridge, facing Cao Cao's million-man army. These are all grand and dramatic events. But there are other kinds of wars. Such barbaric displays might have been common in the ancient, uncivilized past, But in the peaceful present, in the heart of Tokyo, they were unthinkable. The worst that could happen was a riot, like the one at the police station. Therefore, the conflict between Kusami and the 800 students of the Rakunkan was a major event, perhaps the biggest war Tokyo had ever seen. Zhuo Qiuming, describing the Battle of Yangling, began by describing the enemy's formation. This is the standard practice among skilled historians. So, I, too, will describe the students' formation. A group of students had formed a line outside the bamboo fence, their task seemingly to lure my master into the battle zone. "Surrender," they shouted. "No way," my master replied. "Come out." "Never." "Are you scared?" "No." "Bark like a dog." "Woof woof," they barked in unison. Then the entire line started shouting and yelling. To the right of the line, the artillery unit had taken up position on the playing field. A student stood facing the Garyokutsu, holding a large baseball bat. 5 or 6 ken away, another student stood facing him. And behind him, another, and another, forming a line. These were the gunners. Some might say they were simply practicing baseball, not preparing for war. I don't know anything about baseball. But I've heard it's a game imported from America, a popular sport in middle schools and high schools. America is a strange country, inventing noisy, disruptive games like this and teaching them to the Japanese. Perhaps they intended it as a weapon all along. Americans probably consider it a harmless game, but it can easily be used as a weapon. From my observation, the students were clearly using it as a form of artillery. Anything can be a weapon if used creatively. Just as con men use charity as a cover and poets use inspiration as an excuse for madness, baseball can be used as a pretext for war. What others call baseball is probably a harmless game. But the baseball I'm describing is a special kind of baseball, a siege weapon. Let me explain how they fired their dum-dum bullets. One of the students in the line would throw a dum-dum bullet to the student holding the bat. I don't know what these dum-dum bullets were made of, but they were hard, round objects wrapped in leather, like large dumplings. As I mentioned earlier, when one of these bullets was launched, the student with the bat would swing and hit it. Sometimes he missed, and the bullet would fly off course, but usually, it would be hit with a loud crack and fly back towards the line. The force of the impact was tremendous. It could easily crush my master's fragile skull. The gunners themselves weren't the only participants. A large crowd of onlookers and reinforcements had gathered around them. Every time the bat hit a bullet, they would cheer and clap. Did it hit him? They would ask. Is he scared? Will he surrender? And 3 times out of 10, the bullet would land in my master's garden. That was the whole point. Dum-dum bullets are expensive, so even in wartime, they can't be used indiscriminately. Each gunner usually only had 1 or 2 bullets. They couldn't afford to waste them. So, they had a retrieval team to collect the spent bullets. If the bullets landed in a convenient spot, retrieving them was easy, but if they landed in the grass or on someone's property, it was more difficult. So, normally, they would aim for easy-to-retrieve locations. But in this case, they deliberately aimed for my master's garden. And to retrieve the bullets, they had to trespass. And trespassing would anger my master. And if he got angry, he would either have to confront them or surrender. And if he surrendered, he would lose face. And if he lost face, he would go bald. The enemy's strategy was quite clever. The students, knowing that my master would react, sent a young, expendable first- or second-year student to retrieve the bullets. If my master caught him and started lecturing him, it wouldn't damage the Rakunkan's reputation. It would only humiliate my master. That was their plan. It was a perfectly reasonable plan, except for one thing. They forgot that my master wasn't reasonable. If he were, he wouldn't have chased the student in the first place. Madness makes people unreasonable. It amplifies their emotions and makes them act irrationally. If you're selective about your targets, choosing only women, children, rickshaw pullers, or grooms, you're not truly mad. True madness is indiscriminate, like my master, taking a middle school student hostage. The poor student, following his superior's orders, was simply retrieving a ball when he was captured by the mad General Kusami. The enemy couldn't just stand by and watch their comrade being humiliated. They climbed over the fence and swarmed into the garden. About a dozen of them, standing defiantly before my master. Most of them weren't even wearing shirts. Some had their sleeves rolled up, arms crossed. Some wore thin undershirts. One even had a stylish, monogrammed shirt. They looked like fierce warriors, their dark, muscular bodies glistening with sweat. They were wasted on a middle school. They would be better suited as fishermen or sailors. They stood before my master, barefoot, their hakama tucked up high, like firemen ready to rush into a burning building. They stood in silence, staring at my master. My master stared back. A tense silence hung in the air. "Are you thieves?" my master demanded. His nostrils flared, like an exploding firecracker. His nose resembled the mask of a no actor portraying a furious warrior. "No, we're students from the Rakunkan," one of them replied. "Liars. Rakunkan students wouldn't trespass on private property. But we're wearing our school caps with the school emblem. They're fake." "Why did you trespass?" "We were retrieving a ball." "Why did you throw the ball into my garden?" "It was an accident." "You scoundrels. We'll be more careful in the future. Please, forgive us this time." "You think I'll forgive you so easily? Trespassing on my property like this?" "But we're Rakunkan students." "What year are you in?" "Third year." "Are you sure?" "Yes." My master turned and called out, "Hey, come here." Maya-san, the maid from Saitama, opened the sliding door and poked her head out. "Go to the Rakunkan and bring someone here." "Who?" "Anyone." Maya-san simply said, "All right," but she didn't move. She stood there, smirking, amused by the scene unfolding before her. My master was taking this very seriously. He considered himself a great general, wielding his mighty intellect. But his own servant, who should have been supporting him, was laughing at him. This only fueled his madness. "Didn't you hear me? Bring someone here." "The principal, the head teacher, anyone." "The principal," Maya-san repeated, as if that was the only title she knew. "Anyone. The principal, the head teacher, the vice principal." "What if no one's available? Should I bring a janitor?" "Don't be absurd. What good is a janitor?" Maya-san finally left, shaking her head. She still didn't understand what he wanted. I was worried that she would actually bring back a janitor when, to my surprise, the ethics teacher himself appeared at the front gate. My master, seeing him, immediately began his interrogation. "These students trespassed on my property," he began, using formal language like a character from the Chishingara. "Are you sure they're your students?" he added sarcastically. The ethics teacher, unfazed, calmly surveyed the students lined up in the garden, then turned to my master and replied, "Yes, they're my students. I'll make sure they don't do this again. They're quite troublesome. Why did you climb over the fence?" The students, chastened, remained silent, huddled together in the corner of the garden like sheep caught in a snowstorm. It's understandable that balls might fly over the fence. Living next to a school, it's bound to happen. But you were rather boisterous. If you had quietly retrieved the ball, it wouldn't have been a problem. You're right. You should have asked permission. If a ball lands in someone's garden, you should go to the front door, ring the bell, and ask politely. Do you understand? With so many students, it's difficult to keep track of them all. Exercise is an important part of education, so we can't forbid it. But it can be disruptive. I apologize for the inconvenience. I'll make sure they ask permission next time. Very well. You can throw as many balls as you like, as long as you ask permission first. I'll return this student to your care. Thank you for coming all this way. My master, as usual, ended the conversation abruptly. The ethics teacher led the students back to the Rakunkan. The major incident had been resolved. You might think it wasn't such a big deal, but it was a big deal for my master. I'm writing about his experience, not yours. If you think he's a fool for making such a fuss over a few children, then I'm a fool for writing about it. That's what makes him interesting. That's why he's the perfect subject for a satirical essay. Keigetsu Omachi said that my master was still childish. The day after the incident, I went out for a walk. At the corner, I saw Mr. Kaneda and Mr. Suzuki talking. Mr. Kaneda was returning home in his rickshaw, and Mr. Suzuki, having just visited the Kaneda residence and finding them out, was on his way back. I hadn't visited the Kaneda residence recently, since it had become rather dull, but seeing Mr. Kaneda reminded me of the old days. And it had been a while since I had seen Mr. Suzuki. I decided to approach them and eavesdrop on their conversation. It wasn't my fault, they were talking loudly. Mr. Kaneda, being the kind of man who hires detectives to spy on my master, wouldn't object to my eavesdropping. If he did, he wouldn't understand the meaning of fairness. I just visited your house and missed you. What a coincidence meeting you here, Mr. Suzuki said, bowing politely indeed. Actually, I was hoping to see you. Really? What a fortunate coincidence. What can I do for you? It's nothing important, just a small favor, but only you can do it. Anything. Just tell me. Well, Mr. Kaneda hesitated. I can come back later if it's inconvenient. When would be a good time? No, it's all right. I'll ask you now. It's about that eccentric, your old friend, Kusami. Yes, what about him? Ever since that incident, I've been quite annoyed. I understand. He's so stubborn, he doesn't seem to understand his social standing. He acts as if he's above everyone else. Exactly. He talks about money and business as if he knows anything about it. Businessmen are all, and so on. So, I thought I'd teach him a lesson. I've been putting pressure on him, but he's still holding out. He's surprisingly stubborn. He has no concept of profit and loss. He's always trying to save face, even when it's to his detriment. He's always been like that, he never learns. Ha ha ha, he truly never learns. I've tried everything, even using the school children. That's a clever idea. Did it work? It seems to have had some effect. He'll surrender soon. Excellent. He can't fight against such overwhelming odds. Exactly. There's no way he can win alone. So, I'd like you to visit him and assess the situation. Certainly. It will be amusing to see that stubborn man defeated. I'll report back to you later. I'll be waiting. Goodbye. Another scheme. The power of businessmen is truly formidable. Driving my master to madness, making his head a target for dum-dum bullets, even threatening to crush his skull like Aeschylus's, it's all thanks to the power of money. The earth rotates on its axis for some unknown reason, but the world is driven by money. And no one understands the power of money better than businessmen. Even the sun rises in the east and sets in the west thanks to the machinations of businessmen. I've been living with a penniless scholar for too long, I've forgotten the importance of money. But surely, even my stubborn master will learn his lesson this time. If he doesn't, he's in danger. His precious life is in danger. I wonder how he'll greet Suzuki. That will reveal whether he's learned anything. I couldn't waste any time. I slipped past Suzuki and hurried home. Suzuki, as always, was cheerful and affable. He didn't mention Kaneda, making polite small talk. You look a little pale. Are you feeling all right? I'm fine. You look unwell. Be careful, it's a bad time of year for illness. Are you sleeping well? Yes. Is something troubling you? Anything I can do? Don't hesitate to ask. Troubling me? What? Just checking. Worry is bad for your health. It's best to live a carefree life. Laughter is bad for your health too. You can die from laughing too much. Don't say that. Laughter is the best medicine. There was a Greek philosopher named Chrysippus. I don't know him. What about him? He died from laughing too much. Really? That's strange. But that was a long time ago. Does it make a difference? He saw a donkey eating figs from a silver bowl and found it so amusing that he couldn't stop laughing. He laughed and laughed until he died. You don't have to laugh that much. Just a little, in moderation, it's good for you. Suzuki was studying my master intently when the front gate opened. A visitor? No, excuse me, a ball came into your garden, can I retrieve it? Yes, Maya-san replied from the kitchen. The student went around to the back. What was that? Suzuki asked, looking puzzled. A student from the school next door. He threw a ball into my garden. Next door? There's a school next door? Yes, the Rakunkan. Oh, that school. It must be noisy. Noisy? It's an outrage. They don't even study. If I were the Minister of Education, I'd shut it down. Ha ha ha, you're quite angry. What's bothering you? Everything. I'm constantly annoyed, from morning till night. If it bothers you that much, you should move. Why should I move? That's absurd. Don't get angry at me. They're just children, ignore them. Easy for you to say. You're not the one being bombarded with balls. But I am. I've been hit twice already. Really? Well, perhaps you should be more assertive. If you don't like it, tell them to stop. I've tried, but they won't listen. If you can't beat them, join them. What do you mean? Don't be so rigid. It's easier to roll with the punches. Round objects can roll smoothly, but square objects get stuck and their corners get chipped. You can't always get your way. You can't fight against those with money and power. You'll only make yourself sick, and no one will appreciate it. They'll just continue to do as they please, while you suffer. You can't win against such overwhelming odds. Stubbornness is fine, but if it interferes with your work and your health, it's pointless. It's just self-inflicted suffering. Excuse me, a ball came into your garden. Can I go through the back and get it? There he is again, Suzuki chuckled. Excuse me, my master muttered, his face red with anger. Suzuki, having fulfilled his mission, said, well, I must be going, and left. The next visitor was Dr. Amaki. It's rare for a madman to recognize his own madness. By the time you realize you're mad, you're already on the mend. My master's madness had reached its peak during the incident with the students, but afterwards, reflecting on his behavior, he realized that something was wrong. He wasn't sure whether the problem was the Rakunkan or himself, but something was definitely wrong. He couldn't keep getting angry like this. He decided to consult Dr. Amaki, his regular physician. It was a wise decision, even if he wasn't entirely sane. Dr. Amaki, as always, was calm and cheerful. How are we feeling today? He asked. Doctors always ask that. I don't trust doctors who don't ask, how are we feeling today? Not good, my master replied. What seems to be the problem? Do doctors' medicines actually work? Dr. Amaki was surprised, but, being a mild-mannered man, he simply replied, they usually do. My stomach problems never improve, no matter what medicine I take. That's not true. Really? Do you think it's getting better? He asked, as if unsure about the state of his own stomach. It won't heal overnight, it takes time. But it's definitely improving. Are you still getting angry? All the time. Even in my dreams. You should try exercising. Exercise makes me even angrier. Dr. Amaki, looking exasperated, said, let me examine you. As he was being examined, my master suddenly asked, Doctor, I was reading a book about hypnosis the other day. It said that hypnosis can be used to cure kleptomania and other illnesses. Is that true? Yes, there are such therapies. Do people still use them? Yes. Is it difficult to hypnotize someone? Not at all. I often hypnotize my patients. Really? Can you hypnotize me? I've always wanted to be hypnotized. But what if I never wake up? Don't worry, I'll bring you back. Shall we try it? They agreed, and my master was about to be hypnotized. I had never seen this before, so I watched with great interest from the corner of the room. Dr. Amaki started with my master's eyes, stroking his eyelids downwards, as if trying to force them shut. Your eyelids are getting heavy, aren't they? He asked. Yes, they are, my master replied. They're getting heavier and heavier. Can you feel it? My master remained silent. Dr. Amaki continued stroking his eyelids for another 3 or 4 minutes. You can't open them now, he declared. My poor master's eyes were now completely shut. I thought he had gone blind. Can't open them? No. My master kept his eyes closed. After a while, Dr. Amaki said, try opening them. You can't. Really? My master opened his eyes. He chuckled and said, it didn't work. No, it didn't, Dr. Amaki replied, chuckling as well. The hypnosis had failed. Dr. Amaki left. The next visitor was, my master rarely had visitors. It was almost unheard of. But he did have a visitor. A rather unusual one. I'm not mentioning this visitor simply because he was unusual. I'm describing the aftermath of the major incident. And this visitor is an essential part of that aftermath. I don't remember his name. He was a tall, thin man with a goatee, about 40 years old. While Mighty was an aesthete, this man was a philosopher. I call him a philosopher not because he called himself one, but because his conversations with my master seemed philosophical. He was an old classmate of my master's, and they spoke to each other casually. Mighty, he's like a goldfish flake floating on the surface of a pond. He told me he was walking past a nobleman's house the other day with a friend when he suddenly decided to stop by for tea. He just barged in. He's so carefree. What happened? I didn't ask. He's a natural eccentric. He doesn't think about consequences. He's like a goldfish flake. What about Suzuki? Does he ever visit? Suzuki? He's shrewd in a worldly sense, even if he's not very bright. He's the type who wears a gold pocket watch. But he lacks depth. He's restless. He talks about being adaptable, but he doesn't understand what it means. If Mighty is a goldfish flake, Suzuki is a block of konjac tied with straw. Slippery and wobbly. My master, impressed by these witty analogies, laughed for the first time in a while. What about you? Me? I'm like a wild yam. Long and buried in the mud. You always seem so calm and carefree. I envy you. There's nothing to envy. I'm just living my life. I don't envy anyone, and that's a good thing. Are you doing well financially? Same as always. Just enough. But I'm eating, so I'm not complaining. I'll survive. I'm miserable. I'm always angry. Everything annoys me. Anger is fine. Let it out, and you'll feel better. Everyone is different. You can't expect everyone to be like you. You have to hold your chopsticks correctly to eat rice, but you can cut your bread however you like. A good tailor will make you a suit that fits perfectly, but a bad tailor will make you a suit that you have to adjust. But that's how the world works. The clothes eventually adjust to your body. It's a blessing to be born well suited to the times, with good parents. But if you're not, you either have to endure the discomfort or change yourself to fit in. I don't think I'll ever fit in. It's depressing. If you try to force yourself into a suit that doesn't fit, it'll rip. You'll fight, you'll want to kill yourself, you'll cause trouble. But you're not suicidal, and you don't fight, you just get annoyed. You're doing fine. But I am fighting. Even if the other person isn't there, I'm still fighting. A one-man war? That's amusing. Keep fighting. I'm tired of fighting. Then stop. It's not that easy. My mind isn't so easily controlled. So, what's bothering you? My master proceeded to list all his grievances, from the Rakunkan incident to the Amari porcelain tanuki, the stray cats, and everything else that annoyed him. The philosopher listened patiently, then said, "Just ignore the cats. They're not worth your time. And the middle school students too. Why do you care what they do? Arguing with them won't change anything." In that regard, I think the ancient Japanese were wiser than Westerners. This Western obsession with being proactive is flawed. There's no end to proactiveness. You'll never be truly satisfied, no matter how hard you try. See those hinoki trees? You might want to cut them down because they're blocking your view. Then you'll be annoyed by the boarding house behind them. Then the house behind the boarding house. It never ends. That's the Western way. Napoleon, Alexander the Great, they were never satisfied with their conquests. You might think that winning a lawsuit will bring you peace of mind, but it won't. True peace of mind is elusive. You might change from a monarchy to a democracy, thinking it will solve all your problems, but it won't. You might build a bridge over a river, or a tunnel through a mountain, or a railroad across the country, thinking it will bring you lasting satisfaction, but it won't. How far can you go in imposing your will on the world? Western civilization is proactive, progressive, but it's a civilization built on dissatisfaction. Japanese civilization doesn't seek satisfaction by changing the external world. It accepts the world as it is and seeks inner peace. If a mountain blocks your path to another country, you don't try to move the mountain, you find a way to be content without visiting that country. You cultivate a sense of contentment. That's why Zen Buddhists and Confucian scholars focus on inner peace. No matter how powerful you are, you can't control the world. You can't make the sun rise in the west or make the Kamo River flow uphill. The only thing you can control is your own mind. If you cultivate inner peace, you won't be bothered by the Rakunkan students, or the Amari porcelain tanuki, or the stray cats. If they say something stupid, just call them idiots and move on. They say that when an ancient monk was attacked by a bandit, he said, "I cut the spring breeze in the shadow of lightning." That's the kind of witty remark you can make when you've achieved true inner peace. I don't understand such profound things, but I don't think this Western obsession with proactiveness is the answer. No matter how hard you try, you can't stop the students from teasing you. You could use your influence to shut down the school, or you could do something illegal that would get them in trouble with the police. But otherwise, you can't win. If you want to be proactive, it becomes a matter of money. A matter of numbers. You would have to bow to the wealthy. You would have to appease those children. Your desire to fight them is the source of your unhappiness. Do you understand? My master listened in silence. After the philosopher left, he went to his study and sat there, deep in thought, not reading. Suzuki had advised him to use money and influence. Dr. Amaki had suggested hypnosis. The philosopher had advocated for passive acceptance. Which path would my master choose? One thing was certain, he couldn't continue as he was.